high traffic zone.
Well, I didn't plug my computer in again.
It's in the cupboard between the meetings. I have 2 devices for work.
My chair higher than yours? I feel like I'm.
I don't ever touch this.
Yeah, you could make it go down.
Oh, I could just have
What's that?
We're on.
Okay.
Oh,
Good evening, everyone. It's Monday, January 24th, and I'm going to call the special
hello, Ryder.
school board meeting to order. This meeting is being conducted in accordance with the Minnesota statutes that pertain to it, and it is being recorded live. And it doesn't look like we have any problem with the maximum seating capacity tonight, so. First up is approval of the agenda as presented.
Do you want roll call?
Oh, I missed roll call, thank you. Roll call.
Charles Blacklands.
Here.
Kevin Boyles. Tom Hagelin.
Yeah.
Ruth Nelson.
Here.
Jana Shogren.
Here.
Sarah Spear.
Here.
5-6 present.
Thank you, and Director Boyles will be here as soon as he is able. He had a meeting that was running late. Okay, approval of the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Director Sjogren, second from Director Blacklands. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign, motion carried. So today our business is to talk with the school executive representatives. I'll have them introduce you. It's Patty Phillips and Aldo, I don't know how to say it. Sicoli. Here tonight, and Bob Oslin was unable to attend, so. Anyway, welcome, and thank you for coming, and we're excited to work with you again. Although this is the first time you've worked with us, but Patty was here for part of our last one, so. I'm gonna let you take the lead and do your presentation.
I just want to start by thanking you for selecting School Exec Connect. I know that the renowned Patty Phillips and Bob Oslin and I are excited. We think this is a great opportunity for whoever you select as your next leader of the district, and so we're thrilled to work with you. We look forward to the process, and I don't know, we did some introductions before the meeting. I don't know if you want to do any now or if that's
Okay,
suffices.
sure, we can go around and just say who we are and how long we've been on the board and what your position is if you want to.
And what was that?
What your position is if you want to.
Oh, sure. Hi, I'm Jana Shogren. Currently the treasurer, the clerk of the board. We switched. I'm the clerk of the board. I'm just starting my 2nd year.
Charles Blacklands. I am the board vice chair, and I am in the beginning of my 4th year.
Ruth Nelson, board chair, and I am starting my 17th year.
Tom Hagelin, director, and starting my 13th year.
Sarah Spear, also director, and I am new to the board as of December through an appointment.
And I'm Patty Phillips. This is my 7th year with School Exec Connect. It's good to be back. You've got our bios, but just a little bit about me. I was a teacher in Duluth for 3 years, and then I was a teacher, principal, curriculum director, and superintendent up on the Iron Range in Virginia, where we lived for 30 years. And then the last 10 years of my life, I was in North St. Paul, Maplewood, Oakdale as superintendent there. So, good to be here.
And I'm Aldo Sicoli, and it's my 1st year with School Exec Connect. I was involved with a different firm years ago on a search, which I enjoyed very much, but 1st year because I'm newly retired from education. So I was a teacher for 8 years and then got into administration, was middle school, high school principal, assistant sup, and then the last 12 years as superintendent, first in Robbinsdale, and then in Roseville, which was my alma mater. Any questions or comments before Patty gets us going?
Okay, we're going to go through that agenda, those 8 items, and we sent you a draft. The most important thing we're going to do is establish the search calendar today, and I'm so glad your technology director is here because she's going to be our new best friend because there's a lot of things. We want to have a transparent process where the community is really aware of what we're doing. And so we hope in a couple of days, we'll be posting the search calendar and a letter to all stakeholders. And as we go through this agenda, we're going to go through a little bit of our process for those of you that are new to the board and aren't familiar, and if those of you were participating in it 6 years ago, it's a similar process, but I think a refresher is always good. So we're going to start with Aldo talking about the first phase, phase A of the search.
Yeah, so phase A, basically, you've already done the letter of agreement, and then tonight, of course, is the planning meeting. It was a very important meeting, so we have a good time moving forward, and we know the timelines that fit your purposes, et cetera. So we appreciate you making time to get us in real quickly here, so that we can get a good start on this.
And then Phase B is in January, and January is almost over, and a little bit in February. And we're going to do one-on-one board member interviews and any other one-to-one interview that you think we should be doing. And what we're going to do with all these interviews and the survey and the focus groups, we're going to ask everybody the same 4 questions. What are kind of points of pride? What are you proud of in this district? What are the challenges? What do you think the goals of the district should be for the next 3 to 5 years? And what are the characteristics and skills you'd like to see in the new superintendent for the Brainerd Public Schools? And then finally, we ask them, when the school board does their rounds of interviews, their first round interviews, are there any questions that you would like to offer the board as suggested questions? We will do those same questions. The survey people that fill out a survey that don't come in for focus groups or one-on-one interviews will do those same, answer those same questions, except the survey will be, you'll have a choice of things and you check them, and then there's open-ended feedback where you add whatever you want for responses. So, we'll try to get the one-on-one interviews, and we set a time, and we're going to work on the calendar, so whatever dates we have can be changed, but we just tentatively set that for February 2nd and 3rd. We really want to get going on all of this beginning things, because that's the way we get to the profile, which is the picture of what you want this new superintendent to be like. And Aldo and Bob and I use that as our guide, our map. This is how we recruit people, and this is how we get people excited to apply to be this new superintendent here. So we do those couple of days of the one-on-one interviews and focus groups. Focus groups are usually teachers, support staff, students, administrators, and parents, community, and business leaders. And we can bundle them every way you want, and we'll talk before the day is through on what focus groups you'd like that are unique to Brainerd, that you might want some different focus groups than just the norm. The survey is done in this first phase, and the focus groups, the interviews, and then we post a calendar and website on your website and the letter to stakeholders. And I already talked to our technology person about some of that. And then also in the first phase is that we internalize and take down everything we hear from all of your stakeholders, and we bring it back to you in a report at a board meeting. Usually it's at a work session like this, and your closest board meeting to all of this is February 14th, so we'd love to put it on that agenda if you still keep that Valentine's Day board meeting. And again, that could be subject to change as well. So that's phase B. Phase C is in February and March, and it'll be a quiet time for all of you here, but a very busy time for us. This is when we recruit people, we interview applicants, we vet them, we do reference checks. It's, and probably that would run from February 14th till the end of March. We usually need about 2 months for that. And I know there's some interest in maybe moving this up a little earlier, and we'll talk a little bit later about that. Aldo's going to talk about Phase D, and he's been a participant in Phase D twice, haven't you, through this process?
Yes, so we will sit in on all interviews, and we'll bring you a slate of candidates. Usually it's 5 to 6 candidates for you to consider for first round interviews. And usually it's the same evening, but we'll do a interviewing workshop prior to the first interviews. And with that, you'll also get a list of dozens of questions to select from. We'll work with you on which 12 to 14 questions or so will be asked of each of the candidates in the first round interviews. And then we really strongly recommend that at the end of that process of that night of interviewing each of those, however many candidates you choose to interview, that you select 3 semifinalists to move on to the next round, the final round. And part of that reason is it doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while, one of the candidates will withdraw. And I think we find it's better to have more than one candidate as you're going into and through that final phase there. So we'll strongly recommend that you narrow it to 3 semifinalists. Patty talked about the focus groups, the interview teams. The same people who are on the focus groups we'll ask to devote three parts of 3 days, like about an hour or so each, to be part of the focus groups that the finalists will meet with. So the finalists will come on, let's say there's 3 of them, 3 different days. And it's an all-day affair for them. So they'll tour the district, they'll then interview with each of these groups. We'll get as Patty said, Patty and I will get the feedback, we'll compare that with the survey feedback and we'll report to you on that. There's also a chance for them to suggest any questions the board might want to consider moving forward. And then we will, you will later, there'll be a public interview too for a larger group before you actually sit with the candidate in the evening. And so typically that's 3 evenings in a row or 3 days in a row for you, 3 partial days for the candidates, each one day. So that's a pretty extensive process. You could have, if you wanted to, you could ask candidates to give a presentation. That's not done very often, but again, we want to suit your needs for what you need to make the informed decision on this very important decision you're going to make. Anything you'd like to add?
Well, and then when you've done the 3rd finalist, that evening, we run you through a process to help you decide who's the lone finalist that you would like to enter into contract negotiations with. You wouldn't hire a superintendent that evening, but you would begin that next process. And so then you would go negotiate the contract and take action on the contract as soon as possible. So you hang on to that candidate. We want to stress that we can modify the process because of COVID. Almost every district we've been working with in the last 2 years has totally revamped it. So we're very skilled in doing it in a way that is healthy and safe for everyone. And I can see you have the mask mandate here and you're doing things really in a good way. Hopefully, by the time you get to interviewing the finalist candidates, the world's going to be safer, but I keep saying that. I don't know. But I would say that the searches that I did in northern Minnesota, Walker, Hackensack, Akeley, Mesabi East, Deer River, all were during COVID. We did Edina late in the spring this last year, and that was all done with modifications. And when we talk about modifications, I was already so excited that your tech person was here, because one of the big things that it really works well is to do the focus groups, coming up next week, by gathering those people. They can either be in their classrooms or at home or whatever, and we facilitate that and get all the data as though we've met one-on-one, with them. And it really works well. People feel honored. It's a good process. We also do the same with the one-on-one interviews. Anybody that you want to have a one-on-one, we just call them on the phone, schedule a 30-minute interview and get that done. So it's what we really want to do is that these first things are important, because through that we actually get the picture, once we get that profile done, of what you're looking for in the next leader, and then we can start recruiting and move on. So as we get to this, when we look at the whole search calendar, we'll talk more about how you feel about in-person, or you want us to do some of this distance learning and through virtual. I did call our cohorts that do searches in the other parts of the state, and they're all doing, for right now, they're doing their focus groups and their one-on-one interviews virtually and telephone, and they're not deciding on what's going to happen with the interviews until closer to that time. I will say most of these districts, when it came down to the 3 finalists, the finalists came to the district. So you could see them, hear them, whatever. We kept them, when COVID was pretty bad, we kept them in a room in the district, and they did the focus group feedback with all of those focus groups from your district and community. They did it, they were in a room in the district, and we sat with them, the consultants, and then they did it virtually. And then the feedback forms got sent a Google Meet document to all of you. So let's say Monday, April 11th is the first all-day interview. You would get all day long, you'd get the feedback from everyone. And when you showed up at 5 o'clock as board members for the community session, which we like the board to come, the open public interview.
But not to talk at that one.
Not to talk, yeah, you don't get to talk, you just get to watch the candidates. And then you usually have a dinner with the candidate, and then you would end up having an hour-long interview. with not so much the scripted questions that you do in the first round. Legally, the first round interviews, you have to ask all candidates the same questions. The second round, it's like, what did you hear in the first interview that you need to know more from? And what did your focus group say? Could you ask this candidate a little bit more about his or her business experience in the business office? Those kinds of things. So as we move on, we can talk about how you want to do those things. So any questions about, that's just a quick overview of the search. It's a lot to swallow, but.
Sounds familiar.
Okay. So the second thing on our agenda is the letter to the stakeholders. And you got a copy of a draft letter, which we're going to amend as later on tonight you fill in those dates. And that we will give as soon as possible to your technology person, along with the search calendar, to post that on your website. And if you have other means that you contact people, like if all your students bring home the letter, I don't know how you disperse things in the district, but that we will get going as soon as possible. And I think I gave the dates of the second and third, but as soon as we can get that done, we'll do that. Any questions about that district letter coming from the board? And you can wordsmith it as you like or do whatever when we talk about it in a little bit. Okay?
Everyone okay with the letter?
Did you see anything
that read it?
got you irritated or you, okay, want changed? Okay. Number 3, how do you feel about the individual interviews? Who would you like besides yourself interviewed one-on-one? And how do you want the focus groups handled, virtually, or do you want us to come here and do them in person? So this is kind of a little discussion item, and I'll tell you what other districts do as far as the individual one-on-one. Some districts I just do the 7 board members and the outgoing superintendent. And we ask you all those same questions on the sheet that you got. Some districts also sometimes want, assistant superintendent, once in a while a business manager, and sometimes union leadership. Other districts recently have had the union leadership go with their cohort group. So the teacher union president would go with the teacher group. The support staff, paras would have their leadership in with that group, et cetera. So I guess I'd like to hear what you'd want to do about one-on-ones.
The one thing I thought might be nice, since we have some recent board members that have left the board and experienced one, that have been through this before.
Okay.
And know our district pretty well, is maybe add a couple of those.
Okay.
Reed Campbell, Bob Nystrom, Sue Kern, probably those 3 might be nice.
Add to what piece?
To the individual interviews.
With the firm to an individual, correct?
Right,
Yeah.
right. It's for this first thing as far as,
I'm sorry, can we just see where we're following along exactly?
Oh,
too,
okay.
So I know what.
So what?
well, I'm just looking at page after the letter.
Okay.
Which group do you represent?
Okay. I don't know if you have the search proposal there, but it's on
I
page 10.
guess it's the next page, actually.
10, okay.
Individual interviews. So those are just to find out what people want out of us, our next superintendent. It's not to interview the superintendent candidates.
And just so you know, when we report this out, it's reported board members, and if you chose to have retired board members, we would say retired and current board members. We try to bury everybody's answers in a subset of the group, but people have to feel honest to say how they really feel about the questions, and it isn't like you can isolate, oh, I know Patty Phillips said this. We try to tell people it's a very confidential process, even if it's filled out via the surveys. You're buried in a group of here's what all the teachers felt, or here's what all the students felt.
And this first part, and I'm speaking just for myself, but this first part, I'm totally comfortable. In fact, I'm guessing in the future, you'll do a lot of this stuff via telephone or online. I mean, that's just logical for just gathering input. Once you get to the interviews with the candidates, then you want to be in person, but I'm totally comfortable with you doing this all via phone or Zoom meetings or whatever.
How do the rest of you feel?
I'm still lost. Are we talking about
One-on-one interviews first. One-on-one interviews, consultants talk to,
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Tom. So are we, because I heard some possible individuals being considered for this, and now we're on to whether it's virtual or not. So is this,
well, we could do it, you could do it hand in hand. First of all, if you're going to do, we're going to do one-on-one interviews, either virtually or in person, I just want to know who are the people first.
Okay.
But the one-on-one is just to go over the 4 or 5 questions?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
which 4 or 5
Yeah.
questions?
They're on, the document that you got for this meeting, on the second page, third
the
page
I
are the
think we should be
questions.
looking at.
Those 4 questions.
So I'm comfortable with virtual on that, so like if we're doing a one-on-one on those 4 or 5 questions, I'm totally fine with the Zoom or.
Okay. And the focus groups are asked the same questions.
Sure, yep, and I'm comfortable either way.
Charles, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm fine virtually, that's not an issue for me. I do have a question, clarifying question. Was past or retired board members in the last search, were they included
No.
in this?
No.
So I
No,
guess I
but
would question as to why we would do that now.
because we didn't have much change in board members back then. So we don't have to. I just thought they might have some insight.
I guess I would argue that, or suggest that they're gonna have their opportunity in the community forum and
Yeah.
that sort of thing as well.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with that, and I think we're pretty used to doing lots of things virtual these days. I don't think that puts anybody off.
Virtual is good for me.
So virtual, so telephone one-on-ones and virtual focus groups. Am I hearing both of those? I heard some.
So when you say virtual, to me that implies
Zoom,
Zoom, okay.
like a Zoom call, we
Got it.
facilitate it. Your technology person hooks up all, she gets, your district liaison's going to go to your staff and, find out who are going to be the leaders for each of these groups. They're going to get their groups together. We don't pick anybody. The district decides who's going to be part of the groups. And the focus groups would be like a Zoom meeting. We'd ask them these same questions. We invite all of them. If you feel like you didn't have a chance to say some things or you didn't feel comfortable saying it in this, please go and fill out the survey. We want to hear what it's very transparent. And we invite everybody. Board members can fill out the survey as well. The survey will be open a couple of weeks. Same questions.
I apologize. So back to the virtual piece, the expectation then would be that the ISD 181, that our technology team would be carrying that out or taking care of those details?
Yes.
Okay, and then the other question I would have is, do we have the capacity to do that in terms of adding more to that? I'm just wanting to make sure what's part of your responsibility and then what is part of our responsibility.
What we do is give you copy-ready things, get everything ready. We facilitate it. We sit there. But if it's technology, the districts, every search we've done, the district's in charge of their technology in these times. And if they don't have the capability to do it, then we would absolutely just come and do it in person.
I think we have the capability. I'm just, as far as the focus groups, if you do that via Zoom or we use Google Meets, you're doing that. Are you going to want to come here and do that? Aren't you just going to
No,
want to
we can do it from home.
Don't you have the capability to do that,
Yeah, we do
right?
it from home.
Yeah, so you'll use your own Zoom or whatever. That's not, I don't think.
No, we do this all the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, well, for 2 years.
In the past, Janet last time did all of this work. And then it's a little bit more technology oriented this time, so Sarah would help.
You're still setting up all the meetings and invites. It's just not gonna be in person. We'll just do it Zoom. The only question I have is how, are you still wanting to do, get the student groups together? Before we had the student councils from Forest View and the high school, and they joined together here. We can do things like that too. I'd like you to figure out which groups you'd like, but on a Zoom meeting, we can do it all.
I was
No
just gonna
problem.
add, we would do it all on Google Meet if we set up on Google Calendar invites. It's just what, our staff is very used to that. And then our colleagues here would just join that, through that calendar invite as well. So,
Okay.
it's pretty simple to facilitate.
Yeah, and we haven't gone through what groups.
What the groups are going to be at.
So we need to get to that.
So for the one-to-ones, could you repeat what you said is typical?
Typical is, usually it's just the board and the outgoing superintendent. Occasionally, someone will want, let's include our teacher union president or other bargaining group presidents. We've done that at times. Once I had a business manager, but mostly it's the board and the superintendent. But we're open to whatever you want. If there's somebody important that you think we need to get one-on-one information from, that's fine. So, like, let's decide right now who you would like. So the board members, and we decided not the.
Yeah, I'm fine. I would personally like those three because they've been through this process before. They've hired superintendents in the past, and I think they might have some good insight. But if other people don't feel comfortable with that.
I don't think it's a lack of comfort, I think it's a timing thing too. I mean, every one-to-one meeting that we ask these guys to do is another layer and more time. Maybe they could do a small group together, I don't know.
No, we like each of you to be by yourself for the
No,
one-on-ones.
I mean for our outgoing,
Yeah,
or past
yeah.
board members, I'm referring to.
And we have had one district asked, because they started the search super early in December, and the board changed. So they asked us in January to do, they asked us in December to do the people that were running for election, and they weren't elected yet either. Or no, November they were elected, yes. So the new and the outgoing. So once we did
Okay.
a December one.
For me, less is more.
Okay.
So I just soon dive right down to, at the end of the day, it's the 6 of us that make the decision.
I agree.
Okay, so we'll do
That's
6
throughout
board
the whole
members?
process, I'm all about that.
And it doesn't mean we don't want other people's feedback, but it seems like there are many other touch points throughout the
Yeah, yeah,
process
yeah.
where people can
Yeah.
submit their feedback. I just want to be clear, we're not trying to exclude people, but this one-to-one
Okay.
is pretty intensive.
Sounds good.
And it is the same questions, correct? So if they go online and fill out the survey, they're answering the same questions.
Yeah, the survey's a little more rote. It has a whole bunch of offerings, so it's not as just what did you think up in your head? And you check the ones you like, and maybe there's some that you don't like, and you don't check them, obviously, and then you can fill out your own open-ended. So it's a little more drill and kill, but, okay. And everybody can fill out the survey, and there's plenty of open-ended opportunities to do that. So I always tell districts, if somebody comes and gripes and said, oh, well, just the chosen ones are in on this, no, you all can fill out the survey, and the board will see all of that information compiled. Okay? So it sounds like 6 board members and the superintendent, 1-to-1s will be on the telephone, and whoever is your district liaison that we'll decide later, that's the person that's the conduit to us. That person has the responsibility of setting up these groups and talking to the various individuals in the district. For example, maybe there's one principal that's willing to do all the administrative, setting that up, the 15 people. Usually the groups are 15 people, the focus groups, not more than 15. And then the students, usually it's like maybe the head of the student council or one of the principals usually puts that. Sometimes they put just an informational thing out. Anybody interested in being part of this, explains what it is. I think you were the district liaison in the past, so you remember how this works. And a support staff, same thing. That one maybe support person could kind of be the lead, because sometimes, not for this first set of focus groups, but in the spring, when the candidates are there, they usually set up their own questions that they ask. So usually there's the same leader that coordinates the question asking. And sometimes, like, the students don't want to plan the questions ahead of time, and they do a phenomenal job. Just whatever comes out of their mouth is beautiful, and it's a great group. So, but we let the groups kind of decide what they want to ask. Okay. So anything else? So the one-on-one sounds good. Now we're going to move on to the one that's a little bit, and some guides that you have are in this handout that I gave you. It says gathering feedback from staff and community, that sheet, if you have it with you. And it says, it describes the individual interviews, which we just talked about. The focus groups. The focus groups can be Administrators, as I said, teachers, support staff, students, parents, business community leaders, other groups. Invitations are sent to the people that are selected by the district. So they'll get kind of an invitation and they would get a copy of these questions, not to fill out, but just to know this is what we're going to be talking about. And then usually between 10 and 15 people per group. And we schedule a full hour if it's done virtually, like it's going to be done virtually. But 45 minutes is, they ask the questions, and then they have about 15 minutes to just, if it goes on and they have things they haven't been able to say. They're not going to turn in anything. They're not going to submit any Google Doc or anything for this. This is just they talk and we write. 2 of us facilitate it at the same time. So one is the talker, the facilitator, and the other one takes copious notes.
Okay.
Okay?
So we need to figure out
We need
which
to figure
focus
out
groups
who
we
you
want.
would like to be a part of these groups.
So, yeah, we need an administrator focus group, and that's probably pretty easy, because you'll get 10 to 15 people probably by inviting them
Okay?
all.
If you do the full admin, it's 32 people. So I don't know if you wanna try to have the admin group, they're meeting, the leadership group is meeting this Wednesday.
Okay, so they could,
Tim here.
What's the question, Janet?
Well, you're meeting this Thursday, right, or Wednesday?
Yes, ma'am.
So the admin group, could,
pick out their 15 people.
yeah,
Can I make a recommendation for that to be a directive from the board to the director of HR to assemble an admin team that meets your expectations and then have us contact them? Like you said, it's gonna be 30 odd admin total, which is probably more than you're looking at.
yeah.
So I would task someone in the admin team of reporting back to you what that is.
Could we consider maybe just the opposite, maybe go with all these groups, but instead of assigning and hand-picking, could we just open it up to the first 15 that say, I'd like to be a part of it?
I think you want balance from the admin team. You have some that are satellite services, targeted services, you have elementary, you have secondary, you have middle. I think you're looking for some form of balance on that committee. Not everyone is good.
I think your union leadership group would be good to cover the support staff and stuff too.
You could also have a group that is district administration and then building administration. You could have 2 groups
And
if
have
you
2
want.
groups.
That might be a good idea,
I like that.
just because it is going to be a big group.
And then we'd be down to about 15 each. Okay,
Okay,
yeah, let's do that. So 2 groups.
okay. And teachers, you probably want representation from elementary, middle school, high school, early childhood, have a balance of that. And often districts will have people volunteer, as Director Hagelin said, or sometimes the principals, kind of, or the teachers union president, excuse me,
Yeah.
organizes that.
Yeah, I think our teacher union president would do that. And we have a big school district. Is 1 teacher group enough, or do we need to do 2 focus groups with them?
You could have 2 if you want.
We have 400 teachers.
Yeah.
I think 2 groups would
Yeah.
be wise.
Okay,
Maybe you want to separate them, elementary, middle, and high school separate, or do you want to have them mixed?
I can speak to the time, Charles, when you and I attended that meeting, was it union reps? I'm not sure, but it was a cross-representation. I'm not sure if it was union leaders or not, but I really appreciated getting a mix of people together and just hearing the different things that come out rather than really heavily themes. You know what I mean? If you get certain groups together, I think it's okay to have some groups be themed, so to speak, but I thought that was really a productive meeting because we had the cross-representation. So I don't even know if it's important to have it be elementary, middle, and high school. I think a mixture is good personally. And some of it's gonna depend on people's schedules. I'd hate for somebody to be excluded from participating because the one time the elementary school teachers or meeting doesn't work for them or something.
So were you thinking just 2 groups? Is that what you thought was?
Or 3, I don't know if I heard that we should do 3, I don't know, I don't wanna complicate things.
No, I think
but-
2 would be plenty,
Okay, yeah,
because we're gonna run out of,
yeah, absolutely. I like the idea of 2, and all I'm saying is I don't know that it has to be, if you teach at
I
this
don't
level,
feel
you have to
strongly
go to
about
this
that
meeting.
either.
I think you should have the option of either.
And just so you know, you're inviting, all these people to the party. Sometimes they don't want to come to the party, and I don't want you to feel, if you get people that say, I really don't want to be involved in this, because there's a little commitment here on the front end, because if you agree to be in one of these groups, actually, we'd have to consolidate and have just one teacher group for the final interviews. But they're giving up an hour, 3 days in a row, to interview these candidates. And hopefully they, care enough about the process that they'll want to participate. But sometimes people just feel like, so, but I don't want you as a board, if a lot of people don't volunteer to feel like you did anything wrong. It happens sometimes, and you're normal if that happens.
So in order to advise on the process, is that what these focus groups are? Is that still advising on the process part of it?
No, they're helping to talk about your district. This is the way we sell your district. These 4 questions, we leave here and we feel like we've worked here for, 10 years when we're
And
done.
that's the upfront side of
Yeah,
it.
on the upfront side.
Then,
The
so it was not my
back-
understanding that they also had to come back again.
And the back side
interviews.
is, they're giving you input. They know it's your job in statute to check, to select the next superintendent. But they're giving you feedback. How well does this finalist fit with how would they fit in our school district? What are their, strengths? How do they match the profile? There'll be, 12, 14, 16 things on this profile. Do they match all of them? They'll give you feedback. They write detailed things, they'll go through it. And,
Oh, that all makes sense to me. I just wasn't my understanding that they had to be the both. To me, I wouldn't think
Right,
you
that's
have
a
to
great-
inform the process to
question.
also weigh in later.
Yeah,
To me,
yeah.
those could be 2
Yeah.
separate groups and a way to engage more people, but.
Yeah.
That's a great point, because as you're seeing who's interested in trying to get people to fill these slots, of course, you want to be upfront with them, that then we do expect you
Yeah.
later to vote on these 3 days.
Because that wasn't clear to me yet, so that is important. that
and we
people
like
know
them to
that.
come all 3 days, because,
Yeah.
because it's important for continuity to you have feedback from the same group of people over and over again.
Well, that's a whole different ballgame than in how many groups we pick, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
But we would consolidate these, because that person's only gonna come for a day. So if you have 2 teacher groups, or 2 there's gonna be 1 administrative group, 1 teacher group. You have time for about 5 or 6 groups on the actual interview days. So if we're gonna give them enough time to really interview them.
So in that case, it would be like half the people.
Half the people probably, yeah.
Well, and I'm thinking that the commitment of 3 nights, some of these teachers are not going to be able to do that. So
No.
that group of 30 will probably condense down
Yeah.
to 20,
Yeah.
most likely.
And if it ends up being in person, if we're lucky enough that we could have a large group in person, which hasn't happened for 2 years that we could, but you could have all 30 teachers in a room interviewing the finalist, But if we're doing it virtually, it really, in order to give people a chance to ask the questions, you really need to limit it to 15 people. Because they could each ask 1 question maybe
Okay.
in an hour. Okay, so far we have school administration, district administration, 2 teacher groups. Support staff would be your paras, your custodians, your bus drivers, your, clerical support. You okay with 1 group of that?
Yes.
Yep. Students,
That's going to be an interesting one on the support staff of who picks that. Do you remember who picked that?
For what?
For last year, the support staff?
Well, we sent invitations, I think, out, and there was, we just did, because I pulled the schedule from before. So we just had 1 group of staff, which was a lot of the union reps, and we had to make sure it was late in the afternoon when they came for that second round for after work, but We had a, I mean,
Okay.
we had a good showing.
Okay.
That's where when the second round is the staff, we did union and teachers were combined into one group.
Okay.
The original group, we had principals, students, cabinet and directors, staff, community, and then board.
Okay.
That's how we broke it before.
Right, so Janet brings up a good point. I mean, I think with the support staff and the teachers, we want to do it typically as much as possible shortly after the workday.
Yep.
Rather than it being a night thing, but, you know, their schedules are such that they can't really be pulled out as often
Right.
during the day.
I would agree.
So
Okay.
Janet, is this are we given enough direction here too? I mean, we're saying how many groups to have, but who's deciding who's in the groups? I just want to make sure we're not just thinking or
Well-
making decisions, but we're really not, and then Janet's left not
Yeah.
knowing what we were asking.
Yeah, I think the administrators are all, the teachers will have the teacher union head, pick that. Support staff, I'm not sure how we'll do that. It sounds like you sent out letters to all of them, that we get too many.
With that as well?
On the support staff, I think we sent it to the union leadership and
Okay.
let them
Okay,
forward the information out and whoever volunteered.
Great.
Then, because I think we made sure we knew, are we talking a focus group with these groups and then the final group too?
Yeah.
So we're talking early February, right, February 2nd, 3rd, and then in April.
Yeah.
and by the end of tonight, we'll have those.
Right, so, I think when we originally informed them, we let them know that they'd be part of this focus group, but then there were 3 full days of commitments.
Okay.
Right, it's
That'll
just
cut it
an
down,
hour,
so.
3
It's
days.
just an hour for them.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't mean
yeah.
full days.
Don't scare them that badly. Okay.
And then students, do we just do high school students? Is that what we
A
did?
lot of districts just do their high school. Occasionally, they'll do middle school and high school. I don't think I've ever had any elementary. Did you have elementary last
No,
time?
we did middle school and high school, we did student council.
That's typically done during the school
Okay.
day.
Okay, so student council is where our focus
And,
groups.
yeah,
Okay, that makes sense. You guys good with
So
that?
both middle school and high school student councils?
That's good.
Is that what it is?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. And then some districts just do parents like PTO leaders or parents that come and show up for things or whatever, parents from different groups. And sometimes they put the parents with the business, with the community. It's like one group of,
that's what we did.
yeah,
Last time.
like try to get maybe 5 that are parents, maybe 5 that are business or community, maybe 5 that are, whatever.
Okay.
But you can have more if if on the front end, you can have more. At the back end, we could just have one kind of parent/business/community group. Although we do have, when we have these in person, we have a big open community meeting where you put an ad in the paper, and
Anyone can come.
most often you get like maybe 3 or 4 people. Sometimes during COVID, we've had nobody at some of them. And what worked better is we've had these community groups be virtual too. So one night you put an ad out, you try to recruit some parents, you invite some parents, some business community, and we have a focus group, and that works really, really well. The open concept, people have not been coming, well, and I'll tell you what, if you had 100 people coming, that usually signifies there's some issue that, usually it's a very small group that shows up for that. But it's extending it and maybe putting it out in the paper, anybody could call in and, or putting it out to your families, anybody that wants to be a part of this group, call in. And if we got so many volunteers, we could do it more than once, on this front end. I don't want to turn anybody away, and being it's virtual, we could do more than, we don't have to stick to like the 2nd and 3rd. We could take another day, once you're scheduling. Clear as mud?
I'd like to throw out having a underrepresented and inclusion group as well.
Okay.
That is not an uncommon thing. That's a good idea, and that's often done with student groups also.
So on the number 2 at the bottom of this sheet, it says, people to consider including in your feedback sessions. Teachers, which you've done, administrators you've done, parents you're gonna do, support staff, students, intergovernmental groups like city council, police department, fire department, legislators, community groups, Rotary, Chamber of Commerce, Lions, League of Women Voters, ministerial, college, diversity groups, other groups that are important to the school district. And we also like this inclusion group you talked about. When we pick students, we want to have all kinds of students, a variety of students that make up the demographics of your district. And so it's good to have that kind of balance as you select your participants.
Did I hear you say these will be February 2nd and 3rd?
Well, we have to, we don't know what the
We'll
dates
go
are
over the
yet.
calendar.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, I heard those dates.
Those were put on
Something we
the,
gave you to work on.
those were the starting point.
I
I
guess
don't think
it
we
would
could
be
have it any earlier than that.
No.
back to the student portion of underrepresented group. I would see that they could be invited to that, just the underrepresented group as well. I'm not sure how that fit within our student group right now, since that's gonna be the councils for both.
Yeah,
But I would hope that there would be purposeful about
Yeah.
reaching out to some of those individuals.
okay,
Culturally, for some, it isn't the nature to put
Yeah.
that step forward or to be the squeaky
Yeah.
wheel, per se.
yeah.
So we want to ensure, again, and be purposeful
Yeah.
for some of those individuals.
Okay, so is there anything we're missing? So did you keep track of how many groups that is?
I have a count of 9, if I counted right.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, wait.
Charles, when does the equity group meet again?
I would have to look, I can't remember.
Is it a ways away? Because they could,
It's, the next one I think is
There could be some individuals from
February
that
8th
too.
into February.
February 8th.
okay, so that might be
February.
after this, okay. I was just checking. Okay.
But that would be a good spot to draw from.
Yeah.
Yep,
To invite a couple of folks from there.
absolutely.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What am I missing?
I have district admin, building admin, 2 teacher groups, unless we cut that back, a support staff group, middle and high school, are those separate groups, I would imagine, because of the age? And then I have the parent/business, and I have an underrepresented/inclusion group for 9.
What are we going to call that group? That's pleasant.
Which one?
Underrepresented group,
I think that's fine.
that's fine? Okay. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
What was the last group? Colleen?
Underrepresented?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now I've got 9. Perfect. Thank you. And, okay, that sounds good. Anything else?
I got it.
And on the bottom of that sheet, it said, the district always sets the schedules, issues the invites, and sets up a room or a teleconferencing room if we need that.
Okay.
Okay? So, we need to talk about the establishment of the search calendar.
Okay.
And I just want to tee this off by saying that in the searches that we've done, especially in outstate during COVID, we want to get all of this information out and get organized as fast as we can so we get busy recruiting. And when we do a search in northern Minnesota, during COVID, we have had a lot of interest in the positions with during COVID, people want to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city. I'm trying to figure it out because we get a lot of candidates that are really interested in these positions. And what happens is they do not want to press send on their application until they come up here. And they bring their partner and they look at housing, and there's a whole process. And the 4 searches I've done during COVID in northern Minnesota, the same thing happened with all of them. I was very excited about people that start filling up the application process, but they don't finish it, and they want to take the time to come up here and really dig around and see what the housing market is and so forth and so on. They all know they can sell their own house if they're in the metro, but finding a home up here, is an issue. So we're working as fast as we can to get this search going, and we need to have, a minimum of 2 weeks for the survey to be open. And after 1 week, we will contact you and let the tech person know that, we only have 50 people that have filled out the survey. You need to put something out encouraging people, this is your chance, So we want to get as much feedback as we can. Once we get all that, it takes time to get it all together, so that's when we'll be coming back, if you keep the date of the 14th for your board meeting, to come and share all this data and bring you a draft of this profile. And from then on, we use that profile with the interview groups. You'll have it in front of you when you interview people, because you're going to look at everybody and assess them according to that profile. And we do the same. We'll look at each other and say, well, gee, when we started this, 2 weeks ago, I was thinking so-and-so would be a good person to recruit. Now I see that I'm not sure, because there's certain things that are unique to your district that you're going to be looking for. And we're going to look to match that. So recruitment is a big part of what we do. And recruiting takes a lot of phone calls, a lot of discussions, people coming up here to look around, us selling the district to them. And I asked Janet when I first came in, we've got we crafted a template for the ad that will be going out, and we'll talking about the ad a little later on. But with that, we want to have the points of pride of your district. So I said to her, we've got to find someone, whether it's your communications person, whatever, that gives us a list of these things that we can put in this ad to get people really excited. I think Brainerd will sell itself quite easily. You're a top-notch district, and I think it's going to be, I think we'll get a lot of buzz. But we want to make sure that we do everything on the front end to encourage that. And that takes time. We usually need to have 6 weeks to 8 weeks for this recruiting, vetting, getting these people to push the button and say, I'm going to do it. So that's why we set this up as early as we thought we could do justice to the search and have a great pool. But if the board feels they want to move it, that's up to you if you'd want to do something with March. The problem with March is you have a week of spring break in there, and we would probably have to close applications right at the end of February. So we would have hardly any time to advertise this, because we would not want to split up the first round interviews and the second round. So they both have to be after that spring break to do them toward the end of the month. And in order to get ready to do that, we'd have to close the applications early enough so we can do those deep reference checks. When sitting superintendents apply for one of these jobs, it's a fishbowl for them. And they do not really want their name out there until they're for sure, they know we're going to bring them forward as a candidate. And so we can do a lot of internet checking and reference checks from people that we know that will tell us on the QT, I'm telling you, you can't tell anybody kind of thing. But to do the real reference checks where we call their references, we have to wait till we're pretty sure we're bringing them forward. So you were probably thinking, why do you need 2 months? Well, it's a lot to squeeze into less than 2 months.
When you're talking about getting information out to basically recruit and to put our best foot forward for the community, do you just pull from information from our school or our district, or do you partner with local agencies like the Chamber of Commerce or Bladec, I guess?
No, the district kind of will tell us some things like, the beauty of the area, in the ad, there's just, we can't write a novel, but we get little bullets of things. And we'll get that out there in the next few days. But the recruiting part that we do, people are gonna read the ad, they're gonna apply, we're gonna have to interview them if we don't know them, all of that. But I'm talking about us recruiting the people that we'd like to have apply for the job. That we can't deal to really till after the 14th when we see what we hear from all your people, what you're looking for. The ad, we'd like to get out, ASAP, I mean, in the next few days.
So with this current schedule that you have, when would the application period close for the
They'd be
candidate?
closed at the end of March,
Into March, okay. And
Yeah.
then that gives you time.
because we have to have
You
like
need a week.
We have to full week to do all those reference checks and, vet them. And we do that before that, but
Yeah.
actually, again, we don't ever want a board to be surprised by any candidates that we bring you. So we make sure that, on the front end, we do that, very carefully.
The other thing I've seen it with some other positions too is I totally agree with Patty in terms of, you have a spring break during March and we need the time to adequately communicate with possible candidates. But on the candidate side, at least in Minnesota, I mean, spring breaks are during March. And so occasionally you'll get a candidate where they're not as available as they might be. So having that process end in March and getting the actual interview in April is not necessarily a bad thing.
And you're really early when you look at the search scene. We've done, last year we did searches that ended in, late June, right under the wire.
I'm fine with the schedule, other than the fact that I don't know if we're gonna be ready by February 2nd and 3rd with all these focus groups. That seems pretty quick. I mean, we could start with the individual ones and maybe get some of the focus groups going, but that's next week already. And today is, well, I guess it's only Monday.
I'm gonna get my calendar out too.
Yeah, that's a week from
I
Wednesday.
mean,
How
it
do
would be
those
great
done-
if we can do that, but I'm just not sure.
And do they have to be done then, or are those dates you guys just put in as?
Well, they have to be done a little bit early because we have to type it all up and analyze it and, do all that before the 14th.
Yep.
And if we're gonna get it to you, we could show it to you the night of the meeting, but sometimes we like to get it to you ahead of time, your packet, like the Thursday or Friday before.
I guess whatever we can do to hit that mark would be good for me. I'm nervous already where we're at,
Yeah, I think if we
so
can.
I would hate to
Yeah.
wait too much longer than that.
But those are not written in stone. I mean, we could,
Well, could we have that and then just have maybe another date if we don't, maybe that next Monday for ones that don't get set up in time or something? I'm just concerned that
yeah,
some of these groups are gonna take some time,
To pull together.
especially if Janet's in charge of a lot of it. And we can help her, but
I'm looking for my calendar. I mean, we're available to do those focus groups, being that it's virtual. I mean, it's not like we have to do 2 days in a row either. when the set-
That's true.
Because we're at home.
Well, and do we need to get into the weeds on that, or as long as the?
yeah, so
Our
we
idea is
can, we
that
have
you have
other,
information in our board packet by February 11th that would typically come out.
Yeah.
And you guys take care of when the dates are.
I'm inclined, I defer to Patty with her experience, but I'm inclined to say we can do what Chair Nelson has said if we need to push back. What it needs is, but there are 3 of us, but it's getting a lot of information and getting it all sorted out in a reportable form for the 14th.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're saying push them all. I think what Ruth is saying is if we have a group, say, that isn't available the 2nd or the 3rd, could most of the groups happen then in another group be on the 7th or the 8th?
We could go to the 7th and 8th.
We have to push
We
them
could,
all out.
because we do some of them. We can sprinkle these a little more than we do. If
Yeah.
we're showing up, we don't want to charge you mileage and come,
Yeah.
we want to stay overnight one night and do the 2 days, but this way we could, yeah.
yeah,
And I
since they're
think,
all, okay.
Janet, if you end up being the district liaison, we could talk, about this tomorrow.
So it would be pushed back 6 days, is that what you're
Or
saying?
some of them would. They don't have to all happen on those
Yes,
2 days.
they
'cause
they
they're
could happen
virtual.
even on the 4th.
I'm looking, it's,
On a
I'm
Friday.
understanding, it's actually, you're gonna do the focus groups all virtual, so if I can just get the, force view student council together at a time, then you're gonna do it virtually and meet with them as a group, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
It's more the community one.
it's the community one that'll be, and that's what I'm trying to figure out, because before we did it in person. So whoever in the community, we're just gonna give them a Google invite and they'll meet with you, right? So,
And then the one of us that isn't, when you schedule the one-on-one interviews, the two of us that aren't doing the focus groups, if you want to even schedule that at the same time, you can, because the third person, we don't need 3 of us sitting in, but we need 2 for all the focus groups.
okay.
But if you want to schedule,
We're looking at like all day. I mean, we can
all
schedule
day,
any
go into
time
the
during the
night.
day, whatever.
yeah.
I'm a little concerned about the delays ahead that we can't control. And we're already looking at a self-imposed delay on the process.
I don't hear it that way, I guess, though. What I'm hearing is that you will have information ready for our board
Yeah,
packet on February 11th.
we just want to give it to you by the 11th. And if we
regardless of-
can't, we'll send you a quick email saying, we couldn't get it together, you're going to get it the night of the meeting, and we walk all the way through it anyway, so.
So we're still
We're
staying.
still on the 14th deadline. And we couldn't do it any sooner than that. The survey has to run. They got to get organized to get the survey up, and then it's 2 weeks running. So the 14th is the sooner we could do it, because we won't have the survey data back. Because the survey would run till the 10th, and we have to analyze that too.
No matter what, we wouldn't be hearing anything about this till the 14th.
Yeah.
Whether it happens the 2nd, the 3rd, the 7th,
Yeah.
the.
So we're really not changing anything right now.
Okay.
Other than doing it virtually gives us the luxury of playing around with more days.
So I hear what you're saying. Typically, you'd come up for 2 days for our benefits.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not paying mileage for you to come up
Yeah.
over 5 days
Yeah.
to run meetings.
We're trying to do it back to back, so it's efficient.
Okay.
Okay? So it looks like we're going to try to get the letter out by the 27th. We're going to try to get that survey up by the 27th, and we have to customize that survey for you and get it to you. So I'll need your contact information before we leave. How's that? Yep. Okay.
Also, Carla. We have a communications manager.
Yeah, okay. And then we hope to get the ad out by February 1st and have that out running for 2 months. And we'll talk about that
Okay.
also tomorrow. How's that? Board doesn't need to worry about that. We'll send it to you so you see what it looks like
Yeah, good.
when we send it out. Well, we'll always keep you in the loop on everything, okay? And then, so those focus groups might be, we might add 7th and 8th in there. We'll see how that goes or whatever, okay? Maybe we'll just say February and just whatever. We'll fill that in completely when we know what it's going to be. And then we'll keep the February 14th. You're okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. April 4th, we picked out as being a board interviewing workshop, and that's the time the slate of 5, 6, or 7 candidates would be presented to you.
April 4th rather than,
We have 5, 6, 7 in our packet.
5, 6, 7.
Oh, do I have the wrong sheet? Okay. Oh, yes, sorry. 5, 6, 7, sorry. So I needed to know which of those days you, if you want to have 2 evenings, like the 5th and 6th, or if you wanted to do an all-day on Saturday the 7th. And I will just tell you, my experience has been, when they're all in one day, it's really exhausting.
So what, I don't
What
remember.
month are we talking here? There's no Saturday.
April, there isn't a Saturday.
Oh, isn't it?
Tuesday, Wednesday.
Last time we did 2
Those
evenings.
the wrong dates?
We did 3 and 3.
That's the workshop.
Just where we-
You're right. So you see the
This
first
is-
board interview, 6, 7, is a Wednesday, Thursday, and then we have more 7th, 8th,
Yeah,
but that's still Thursday, Friday, or 9th.
the
9th
9th
would be a
is,
Saturday.
the 9th's a Saturday,
So
yeah,
now we're talking about the interviews.
Right.
yeah.
The interviews are on the
Go
Saturday?
one at a
Well-
time, so we could pick.
No, we have a number of dates there.
For a choice for you.
okay.
4 dates,
So the workshop, what do we do at the workshop?
You could do at the workshop, we decide on the interview questions. We're going to send them,
Okay.
we're going to send you like 80 or 100 questions ahead of time. and you're gonna all vote for your top ones, and we're gonna have that already, what the winners were, and then you're gonna decide who's gonna ask what when. So we do that, talk about interviewing protocol, and then it's usually like an hour-long workshop, and then we are gonna give you the bios without the names of the
Okay.
5 to 7 candidates, because you can't say their names until the board has made them a finalist.
So would April 5th work for that, and then the 6th and 7th for the interviews? 'Cause that would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Pardon?
I'm just asking the board.
Okay.
Trying to, or no, that would be
The first
Tuesday,
question-
Wednesday, Thursday, I'm sorry. Tuesday,
Can we go one thing at a time? I think it's helpful. We need a workshop, right, which is an hour?
Well, I was gonna ask, and thank you for, can we do one thing at a time?
Yeah,
but
because I'm
could-
just getting, having never done this before, I guess, I need it
Well-
maybe parsed out a little bit more.
Well, we need to have those days all in a row, so that's why I lumped them together.
But could we do
They
the,
have to be all in a row?
Could we
To
do
have
this
the
so-
workshop? Doesn't have to be all in a row. The interviews, I understand, have to.
Okay, so we could do,
We're gonna do it
okay.
in person, simply because there's probably travel involved if we're.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, the workshop, you need to meet with us on the questions.
Yes.
could that
That's a
just be
whole-
virtual? Could you just send us the 100 questions, let us select our top 10 or whatever, however you do that? And
like
we
that
get the
idea.
candidates as well, so we get that in advance?
But we have to walk you through the bios of the candidates, and then that evening, once you accept the slate, then we give you a packet with all of their information, a thick packet. So we almost need to be here for that. I've never done that virtually.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I suppose you could do it virtually if someone was, I suppose you'd send you everything online. I
I
don't
guess
know.
I'm just confused how we would meet one night and choose the candidates and then they're all magically available the next night?
Well, here's what we do. We tell them, we're bringing your name forward, but it's not a guarantee until the board, so we call them after the board meeting that
wow.
night. So I had put on my thing, and I don't know, you have a different date on yours. I put April 4th as the, I don't know,
Yeah, we have 5, 6.
I think you're skipping the line of the board interviewing workshop. Do you even have it on here? Or you have 5th, 6th, or 7th?
Yeah, it's
Oh.
April 5th, 6th, or
Okay.
7th.
So, yeah, and we would tell them the dates you select for interviews, so that if you do include
Gotcha.
the recommended slate, they
Okay.
know that they might be in the next day.
Got ya.
And we call them to say, sorry, they're not bringing you forward, you know? So it's just the way it is. And that's why we like to have a day between it. But a lot of times it isn't, it's neck and neck.
So where'd we land on Tom's question about the virtual of that first portion?
We're not gonna know that until closer to the date.
We can't choose interview questions, well.
Or you can choose
before-
interview, oh, you mean choosing interview questions virtually? Yeah. We could do that all virtually. I suppose we could do the slate virtually, and maybe, would you be meeting here, though?
Well, if it's an official meeting, I don't think that we should go virtual with that. I guess I'm not proposing that, but
But
I think
I
to Tom's point,
assume
couldn't we
that-
get questions emailed to us and?
Yeah, I guess I assume that you've already vetted the 30, 40, 50 applicants, and you're going to recommend these 5 or these 6, and those are the 5 or 6 that we're going to interview. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're bringing them forward that you suggest we interview, I don't know what seeing a bio is going to do to say, no, not that one.
Well, we want you to be aware of, and we don't, it's like in Minnesota, you kind of have to do it blindly without the names, because it's
Yeah,
the
no,
law.
that's fine.
And that's why we're trying to give you a picture of them, why we believe they're the 6
Right.
or 7 best candidates.
Yeah, but I
think I
think,
understood you correctly. Maybe the implication is that it's unlikely that, I mean, the board would accept the candidates is what's the likely outcome, which I think is what usually
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, I've never had anybody say they
yeah,
didn't want
that's
them.
why I'm saying that
Yeah.
if, I don't,
If we're all okay with accepting the 6 or 7 candidates. And I'm fine with that.
I mean, those
You won't
5.
know until you actually see the bios, and you have the right to not accept them.
Okay.
But that is usually how it plays out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there would have to be something really, I would think, very, almost catastrophic. You're recommending to interview these 5, and we say no on one. It seems like that would be,
Not
I
very
guess
long.
I'm trusting you're bringing forward the best candidates for us.
One thing I heard Patty say that may be important here is that, okay, so we have that date, whatever date you select. Then she said it can be helpful to have a date in between so that you can call the candidates before you actually start.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So the You said the 4th, but
Well,
I don't see
I
that.
thought, maybe the 4th would be the idea. You have that on the 4th, at least we put it in now. And just so you know, during COVID, we post this search calendar, in a couple days. And we modified it in some districts 3 times because things changed and we couldn't do it the whole way we hoped we could. So at least let's think of what would we want? Would the Monday, the 4th be good? Have a space and then interview of the nights of the 6th and 7th? Or 5th and 6th, excuse me, or 6th and 7th.
So for clarification for myself, so we would get together, let's say April 4th, and our agenda would look like, here are the slate of questions we're approving, and you would present the bios to us, and we would have an affirmative vote that, yes, these are the X number of candidates we're bringing forward, and that would be the extent of that meeting that night. Just to
And then you would go into
clear.
your regular meeting.
But we don't have a regular.
Well, you'd have to set one because you have to make the slate, you have to take a vote.
Sure,
Right,
but
it would be a
this
special meeting that we would be
Special meeting.
having for this purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to that point, it doesn't
That
even,
step doesn't take a lot of time.
yeah.
So the special meeting could be on the 4th, and then you could interview the night of Wednesday and Thursday, the 6th and 7th. Or you could interview the evening of the, Saturday of the 9th if you wanted to do all the candidates in one day.
Nope.
Yeah, I'd rather do 2 evenings.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And even to that point too, I mean, it could be potentially a noon meeting on April 4th to,
Yeah, we could make that meeting new.
right?
That would be kind of nice.
So we don't have 3 evenings.
Noon, April 4th.
And I just put that forward as my own recommendation. Charles may have a different idea of not wanting a noon meeting, or somebody else, but.
Well, this
And
isn't
then-
about Charles.
So noon, April
Or
4th.
Tom, maybe, you don't wanna, maybe you have lunch plans on the 4th.
Yeah, and that
already,
gives you
Tom.
more time too.
And then do you want to do the interviews? Right, we
evening.
can do it the 5th and 6th if you want, or you can skip a day and do 6th and 7th. We've done them both, and it works out fine, whatever you're,
Especially if we're doing noon on the 4th.
yeah.
That would give you more
I'm
time.
open, though, so you guys,
Yeah,
what
I'm
works for
okay
you?
too.
Yeah, I think that's
Works
fine.
I'm
for me.
open then too.
Tom, do you have a preference?
If it works for Charles, that'd be great.
Okay, so the
April 4th at
4th,
noon?
and then, do you want to do it the 5th and 6th and get it done?
Okay,
Okay,
okay.
5th and 6th.
And then, so then that would be on the 6th that you selected your, narrowed the search.
We do that at the end of the 6th.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
And we don't ever have you go home without doing that.
Okay.
We always make sure that gets done. And then you have a board meeting on the 11th. And remember, that's the all-day where we would most likely have the finalist, number 1, would be here on day 1. So we could do it the 11th if you wanted to change your board meeting, which I don't think you probably want to. You can't do that and have the interview.
Right.
Because you take up too much time. You're going to watch the community thing at 5 o'clock interview. You're going to have dinner with them at 6. You're going to interview them from 7 till 8. So your role those 3 days are you arrive at 5 to watch, 6, eat, 7, interview.
What day are we
So
talking?
on this copy, they have.
We're down
be
now
like
to
the
the
12th.
finalists all-day
Okay.
interviews. We need
What-
3 days in a row.
On the 5th and 6th, what time do those interviews start?
Those last time started,
The 12th, 13th? Or what did you say about?
On the 5th and 6th.
5th and 6th, how long are those interviews and what time does?
1 hour each?
So starting at
And
5,
we
so
would-
5, 6,
Started-
and 7.
last
You
time we
got some
did
time in
5,
between.
6, and 7.
Yeah, they're an hour each.
Any chance those could start at 4 or is that too early?
You could,
Okay.
yeah.
Start at 4.
And do 3 each night, is that what I'm hearing? Or 2 to 3, depending on how many we choose. Okay.
So we probably do 6, and you'd need 3 interviews, so you could do 4 to 5.
Yeah,
You-
if we
5
start
to
at 4,
6.
I trust you guys to schedule
Yeah.
them as prudent.
And then on the 6th, we narrowed down to 3, right?
Yes,
So then you have your board meeting on the 11th, and then do we do the,
12th, 13th, 14th?
for the
How do those work for you?
interviews?
So we'll have our board
February?
meeting on the 11th and then the
April.
12th.
Already in April.
We're in April? Yeah, I can make anything in April. Just not today, evidently.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Patty Aldo. Hi.
Thank you.
So-
Sorry for my tardiness.
So how do the 3 days work for the finalist interviews? You would name the finalists on April 6th. You'd have that weekend in there. And then the 12th, you'd have your board meeting on the 11th. You'd have an interview on the 12th, one on the 13th, and one on the 14th. And they would be, you would need to arrive at 5, as I said, and you'd be tied up till about 8 PM on those 3 days. And on the 14th would be the day that you would choose one finalist with whom you'd want to enter into contract negotiations. And then you would decide when you wanted to negotiate the contract. You'd probably have a special board meeting to do that, approve the contract, and they'd assume duties in July of 2022.
Is there a, I don't remember last time, I thought we did away with the dinner piece.
No, we had the
No,
dinner
we
piece,
have-
You had it. I remember it.
but yeah.
I can tell you exactly where you ate. Notes.
You know what Tom ordered?
I thought there was discussion of we would bring it in, not go somewhere,
There was discussion of that,
or conversation. maybe, not
yes,
discussion.
yeah.
I
guess-
kind of like the idea of showing them around town and what's available out there.
Taking them somewhere
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, I do too. I think it gets to be a really long time in these buildings, and I think we're trying to sell an entire community too, and so to.
We did invite spouses to the dinner.
That's right.
So, you mean candidate spouses?
Yes.
Or
Yep.
not our spouses, right?
No.
Okay.
We can decide that closer to the time too, and set those times up, but at least if we have the dates on here,
Yep.
how
Yeah,
does
we're
that sound?
getting, this took longer than I thought it was going to.
But those three are each individual day, those 3 days, right?
Yep. And we kind of have to do them back to back, so.
And that's the 5, 6, 7?
No, see, you'll do one interview.
No, I know, but 3 days in a row, we can't really split them up.
Right.
Yeah.
We are bumping up against the Easter holiday, just so people
Yeah.
realize that Thursday, that's a little bit of a, I mean, I'll make it work if I need to, but that's a little bit of a tight one to bump into
Yeah,
that
no issues as far as
Thursday
I'm
before
concerned.
Easter.
Yeah.
Okay. How are we sitting with all those?
Yeah, the 13th is not good for me, but, I was hoping to do all 3 in a day, but
Could you be virtually in on it? No? For the interview at least?
what time would all this take place?
You would show up at 5 to witness the community group interviewing the finalist. And then around 6, you'd go for a dinner, 6 to 7. And then 7 or 7:30, you'd have the final interview for an hour, 7:30 to 8:30, 1 hour, or 7 to 8. And if
So they're gonna already see the community before we get to them, so that's gonna already take place. You know, our dinner has to be open to the public.
Another thing you could do, just thinking out loud, on the 11th, you could move your board meeting, if other people could, to a different time of the day, before 5 o'clock. Because you wouldn't have to show up till 5, so you could have your board meeting, get it out of the way, and then you could do the 11th, 12th, 13th.
That doesn't
Well,
help you at
13th
all,
is still
though.
bad for
That
Tom.
Oh, that doesn't help.
That helps me,
Well,
but it doesn't
11th,
help
12th, 14th.
We'll just go with the 12, 13, 14.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'd really like all of us to be there for all of them, so if it doesn't work for you, Tom, we should discuss it.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
It sounds like it's not an easy thing to change, whatever.
That was when I commented about, I thought we were gonna bump up against this, and that's why if we could've snuck in 1 week earlier, it would've been ideal, but,
Yeah, move everything up 1 week.
yeah.
So should we leave it what we thought right now and?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Double check, Tom, and if it doesn't, maybe we can move the board meeting up early and do 11th, 12th, and 14th. Okay. Would that be better? 11th, 12th, and 14th?
But let's just go with this.
Okay, okay.
We have two quick
Yeah.
things on the agenda, or actually the advertising campaign, the board liaison and the district liaison, and compensation guidelines, and those will just take a second.
Yeah, so the advertising campaign, if you look at the last page, the bottom of the page. So, we put it out on MASA and MSBA and School Exec Connect, there's no fees with those. So what we need to know on the ones that do have fees, Education Week, 4 weeks online nationally, $395, and the American Association of School Administrators, 4 weeks, $599. Do you want either of those, or do we just go with the top three and that alone?
What is your past experience with those?
Depends on the district. Most districts that I do searches just take the 3 free ones. Occasionally, districts will do the other. Just know School Exec Connect is in the whole Midwest, so that goes out to all of our 60 consultants in all the Midwest school districts. And people hear about it. We've had California people that have applied even without a national ad. But this is a deal. When I called Sylvia, who hooks up, works with us, and I said, everything else in the world has gone up from pork chops to hamburger. So I'm sure the advertising is way up and it's cheaper than it ever was. So we've never had $5.99 for 5,000 plus superintendents in the United States get the ad, and they get 4 weeks advertised by AASA. So it's cheaper than it used to be.
Emailed, yeah. I would say no to Education Week, and I'm open to the American Association. That would be,
Actually mirrored my thoughts as well.
okay.
I'm comfortable with that.
Other than I was going to put you two on the spot and tell you to pick one between the two, but it sounds like Ruth did.
Yeah. You all want
I
to do
mean, just
that?
because it has, it
Okay.
goes directly to.
I'm comfortable with it.
Okay. Board liaison and district liaison. We need one board member who, if there's buzzing in the community, questions, people are wondering about things, someone that would call us. So oftentimes it's the board chair. Sometimes the board chair asks someone else that they'd be willing to do it.
I can do it if you are okay with that.
Okay. And then the district liaison is oftentimes the executive assistant for the superintendent. Sometimes it's the HR director, whatever. You have a really
Janet did
seasoned
it last
person
time,
here.
so-
Very experienced person.
Hannah was wishing her computer was bigger.
Okay.
Okay. And then Aldo?
Quick on the compensation guidelines, so we advertise it as the compensation is commensurate with the area and the experience of the candidate. So that's typical, but the reality is that some candidates are gonna ask when they're talking about the position, when we're talking with them. So if you can let us know, figure out a range that you're comfortable with as a board. It's not something we publicly put out there, but when we ask candidates, then at least they know is it what meet their needs. And if for some reason it's not, and we think it's a strong candidate, we can talk with you, but it's helpful to know the range.
So how do we decide that and communicate that?
Do you have a finance group or a subcommittee, or maybe one or two of you meet with your HR director? We also like a copy of the current superintendent's contract. We'd like that,
Okay.
within the next week or so. You could just email it to us.
Director Boyles is our finance, and since I'm the liaison, I'd say the two of us meet with.
Sounds fine to me if the rest of the board is comfortable with it.
Yeah. And if it ends up we get a candidate that's way, there's an issue we need to talk to you about, we'll call you to let you know, and just let us know if you want us to say you'd be flexible on it. We've had some seasoned Metro superintendents moving up here for jobs, and the going rate is a lot higher down there, and if that happens, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Okay.
One more schedule question. When would it be likely that we would need to call a meeting to discuss contract negotiations? How soon after that 14th?
Well, you'll already have decided that, because you'll kind of have your range, and you'll have to call the candidate, you'll make kind of your offer to them, is the way we do it. So as soon as possible, I didn't put anything on the calendar, so, but as soon as possible, you don't want to let this go because you didn't reach a contract together. So, usually that's same next week, we get together. And you can do a lot of it on phone, back and forth, or email.
So the week after Easter is maybe the best way to put it, Jana, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe you'll already have a model contract already, where you've said this is your range, and you see that somebody meets the top of your range or the bottom of your range or whatever, and you'll make that first, here's our thoughts. They send it, have a lawyer look at it, they'll send it back to you. You go back and forth, sometimes a couple times, sometimes it's done in a day, so. Good question. So we didn't put, we'll just say to be decided when you decide to set that meeting. And if you decide you know what it is, we can fill it in and update the website.
In the meantime, if you probably haven't ever seen our current superintendent's contract, we probably should get that out to all board members so they have some idea of what's in there.
So we'll fill in the blanks of everything you said looked okay at this point. Get it to Janet and your tech person, and then send it to all of you to take a look at it, and then we'll put it out there as soon as we can. Thank you, been great to work with.
Thank you so much.
So I actually have an action item on this to approve the guidelines and timeline that we just discussed.
I'll move to approve as presented.
First from Director Boyles, a second from Director Blacklands. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And before you leave tonight, let Janet know times that would be okay to have your telephone interview too. It'd be good, or she'll
Okay.
send you an email, whatever way you want to do it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
30 minutes, yeah, thank you.
Yes, we have 5 minutes,
We
I
need to
think.
adjourn this meeting.
Oh, yes, we need to adjourn. Motion
I'll
to
move
adjourn.
to adjourn.
First from Director
We have
Schroeder,
like 2
second
minutes.
from Director Blacklands.
Technically, you have exactly 2 minutes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Meeting adjourned. 5, we ran just a little bit late from our previous meeting, so sorry about the delay. And I'm going to call the meeting to order, and we'll have roll call.
Charles Black Lance,
Here.
Kevin Boyles,
Here.
Tom Haglund,
Here?
Ruth Nelson,
Here.
Hannah Shulgren. Here. Sarah Spear,
Here.
all present.
Thank you, and we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, yeah. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, this meeting is being conducted in accordance with our Minnesota statutes. It is being recorded and can be monitored from a remote location on YouTube Live. It's being recorded. The maximum seating capacity here is 23, and it looks like we're fine, but there's another room, meeting room in 200 where you can sit. Face coverings are required for all people in attendance, so please use your face covering. Thank you, sir.
I get you.
There's one over there at the door.
Yeah, there are additional face coverings over by the door. Okay, we'll go on to the approval of the agenda. Is it amended?
Were there any amendments?
Was it? I don't know of any, but, okay, as presented.
Approved to move as presented.
I'll second.
First from Director Boyles, a second from Director Blacklance. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign, motion approved. And we'll start with our recognitions.
Well, it's very fun tonight to congratulate our boys swimming team, boys swimming and diving team. This little over a week ago, they had the 2022 8AA True Team competition, and they ended up being the True Team champions. And they were also the 2022 True Team Event champions. And so we are just really proud of our kids. They're having quite a season, and so we're anxious to see how sections are going to go and as they move into state. A couple of the relays that took the new 8AA True Team records are as follows. The 200 medley relay with Thomas Rule, Parker Tachi, Cade Rosenwald, and Mason Keepers was at 1 minute, 39.9 seconds. And our 200 free relay also took first place and a new True Team record with the same people, Cade Rosenwald, Thomas Rule, Parker Tachi, and Mason Keepers at 1 minute, 28 seconds, 28.79 seconds. Congratulations to those swimmers, and good luck as they enter
That's very cool.
into postseason. So, yeah,
cool.
quite the feat.
Congratulations. Yes. Okay, next we have time for public input. We have 2. Thank you. Our first is from Natasha Hamilton. You can come up. And she is a parent of an ISD 181 student.
Hi, I'm a little nervous. Thank you for taking the time. I am the mother of 2 amazing boys in this district, which I would like to say I do appreciate this district. My children are thriving educationally as far as grades and academics. I come to you now as last resort. I need you to hear me and open your minds and your hearts to receive my message. I'm speaking with all due respect, and it comes from a place of concern and wanting a positive change. It's well known, that there is an uptick in recent gun violence or gun-related threats and activities involving social media, whatnot, in the district. A child brought a gun to the school at the high school. That said child is now back at the school bragging about bringing this gun to school. Per the school gun rules, they are banned. There is not and should not be an exception to this rule. This is not how we show students. It's not tolerated. The response is, it's a BB gun. And I say to you, yes, today. Tomorrow it could be something else. Take proactive action and have that child maybe join an alternative learning. Maybe try and get them more help where they can get more staffing, go to a school with more staffing. There are shortages at this school and it doesn't ensure adequate supervision and support can be provided to the student. That's a disservice to this child who is behaviorally yelling for help. I wish you would listen. My son shouldn't feel unsafe or uncomfortable going to school. We shouldn't have to get him out of school or have to transfer. It's your job to ensure they have a safe learning environment. You're gambling with my child's well-being and hoping it doesn't occur, and I don't approve of that way of managing our educational system. There's a disconnect regarding what's important. In the budget plans, I don't see anything regarding safety planning or violence prevention or helping educate the children. Why? Unfortunately, our children's lives are in your hands. Start taking action against guns, violence, drugs, racial slurs. Communicate with parents. We need to know you're doing something. Start following up and please follow through. It shouldn't take a loss of a life to make a change in a district when there are red flags that are very clear. You do not have the right to decide what gun threat is okay for our children to be around. I, as a parent, am telling you I don't accept the district not taking these safety concerns serious. Nobody thinks or believes it could happen at their school, and the sad reality is, it is a possibility. Guns and drugs need to be stopped at the door. Please, I'm begging you, don't dismiss or disregard what I'm saying. I hope this helps to open the dialogue and create a change we need and want. Thank you for your time.
Second is Doug Kern, and he's a community member.
Today I watched a symposium, I watched a symposium that they had in Washington DC, and they had the frontline doctors and a bunch of other officials were talking about the whole COVID thing. And I watched about 4 hours of it and then I had to get to work. But it was extremely, extremely good. I wanted to say thank you, board members, for tabling the COVID testing and the vaccinations and the testing. Thank you for tabling that. And I also want to say thank you again for using the Executive Connect, the people that you were talking to earlier. That's wonderful that you're going to look at a pool of people outside of our district. It's a very, very good thing that we're bringing in other people to look at, for the public to look at, and for you guys to look at. So I just want to say I appreciate that. And we're going to miss you. I mean, you've done an awesome job, Lynn.
Yes.
You've done a good job. So, but I'm glad that you guys are using Executive Connect. So thank you.
That's our public input for tonight. Thank you, everyone. Next up, we have approval of multiple minutes. The first one is the special organizational school board meeting on January 10th.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
First from Director Spear, a second from Director Blackglance. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next up, we have the regular school board meeting on January 10th.
I'll move to approve the regular school board meeting on January 10th.
I'll second.
First from Director Blackglance, a second from Director Sjogren. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And finally, our special school board meeting on January 19th.
Move to approve.
Second.
First from Director Hagelin, a second from Director Spear. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And then we have our consent calendar.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
I will second.
First from Director Blackglance, second from Director Sjogren. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And we're right into new business with Marcy Lord and our first revision of the 2021-2022 budget.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thanks, Ruth. So tonight we're going to talk about the first revision of 21-22. In June, the board approved the preliminary budget. And last board meeting, excuse me, we did go through the audited data. And so this is just a real brief summary, just gonna touch base. The unassigned fund balance did end with a $3 million plus. So we ended with 10.8 million approximately in that. And that's 12.6% of our expenses. So we're above that, our policy of 10%. So just wanted to touch briefly on that. We talked about it at the last meeting, as I said. And then looking at our preliminary budget. So when we built this budget, we had 2.45% on the gen ed formula. And we were projecting that we'd be down 57 in enrollment. Compensatory, as you know, our free and reduced numbers were down, so we had a projected decrease in that as well. Federal funding, we generally project a 10% decrease in our title funding. That's just kind of a standard. You'll see that in this year's as we're planning as well. And then also we had the estimate and change in contracts. So the big thing with the revision is student numbers and staffing. That's the big part that we look at when we're looking at our revision. And then also, in the preliminary budget, we also look at what our known and estimated savings are, and then in the revision, that's the big part that we review is students and staffing. So in the preliminary budget, our projections were that we would end 2021 with 6,194 students. 21-22 then projected out to be 6,137 students based on that ending number. This projection model is used provided by Ehlers, and it takes all the data, runs the historical, the last 6 years, and computes out these numbers that we use for our projections and then put into the what if. So the what if is provided by the state, and it calculates what our gen ed revenue would be based on these student count numbers, and then that's what I use in the budget. So with the preliminary budget, we had a deficit of about 800,000 in the unassigned. There are other categories, but I always focus on the unassigned because that's our least restricted fund balance. That's what we can call on a rainy day savings. The other categories, they do have some impact, but they are very specific. So for example, staff development, we can only use for staff development activities. So in the first revised budget, we did have a decrease in enrollment of 93 instead of 57. And that's due to we ended the year with 6,168. So we were actually down 26 from what our projection was. And then there was a difference between the incoming kindergarten and outgoing seniors. We were projected better than what we had estimated. So we had estimated 430 kindergarten, and we actually have 441, so that's good. But then we had more migration between grades, meaning more kids left us than what we had projected. So between that, the current revision has 6,075 students in it, with the decrease of the 93. So then I go through and I recalculate the what if, review allocations for SPED, medical assistance. Last year we did spend less on special ed expenses, and special ed is always a year behind. So our revenue is actually, I had to do a decrease on that projection just because we spent less in special ed last year. And then the medical assistance billing, it's similar to, there was like a catch up. And so last year we received more funding, and it's going back to its lower level this year. So that is also in that revision. And then update on salary and benefits, staff development, and then anything that maybe is unused or when we review it. There's actually almost over 6,000 line items just in salary and benefits alone. So we review all of that during this revision, which is a little mind-blowing when you think about it. We take a snapshot of the current staffing, and you'll see, I'll touch base in a little bit on a page where it summarizes each category and where we're at compared to what we were in the preliminary budget. So this is also a little snippet from the Ehlers projection model. So it takes the 6-year average of October 1 versus the end of the year. So our current October 1, 2021, was 6,306. And then it applies that 3.3% average and estimates that we'll end with that 6,075 this year. So with all those changes, this first budget revision, we're looking at about a 1.9 million deficit in the unassigned. And this includes an increase in the CARES funding. We were projected to spend about 2 million. With the revision, it'll be about 4 million, and that funding does end June 30th, 2024. So just want to, have a word of caution that those funds are very, very helpful, but they are going to expire, and we will need to come up with a game plan for when those funds are gone, because we have used a number of them on one-time purchases, but also staffing. So just be advised on that. I'll do a more detailed summary at the next board meeting of the CARES funding, just so you guys can see more of what we're spending that on. And then also wanted to note that on page 4, it does have all the funds. So, I'm focused in the PowerPoint on general fund, but in the document in your board packet, it has all the funds. And the construction funds does show a deficit of about 800,000 in the restricted. And that's based on ICS's draws, but I don't want that to be alarming because we were given donations. So for example, the Sourcewell funding is 3 payments. So first payment we received this year, we'll receive a payment next year and the following year. So it shows a deficit, but there is funds coming in to cover that, just as a heads up. And then on page 8 is the staffing summary that I mentioned. It shows that we're up about 16.25 FTE. And the majority of that is with CARES funds. So, as you're approving the positions in the board packet, there was a number of them for subs, full-time subs that would just be in the buildings because we were so short-staffed on that. All of those are coming from CARES funds. So, yes, it looks like, we've added a number of positions, but a lot of that is funded from CARES funds. And then also, there was a number of positions that were held, and we assessed based on student needs. So we didn't actually add those positions back until we came back in the fall and said, okay, we do have these students that need these positions, so we're gonna add them back. Had they not returned, they may not have been added back. And then also on page 8, I did add district level admin. We generally look at that with the preliminary budget and at the levy. And if we go with the state average of 4.8%, we would need to add about 1.8 million in admin to get up to that level. So I just wanted to note that as well, that we are low on that number compared to the state average in this year's budget compared to 1920. In page 9, there's amounts. I actually detail out those amounts. So for example, Gen Ed aid is $200,000 loss because of that change in enrollment. So you can see more detail on those lines on page 9 if you're interested in okay, when she says special ed revenue, what does that mean? Or medical assistance, it's a decrease of 75,000. So there's more detail in that as well. And then, so with this revision, our fund balance policy is the 10%. It would put us at 9.69, and it is below. However, I just want to note that with all this CARES funding, it is a lot more than what our normal budget is. So that CARES funding is in the total expenses, so it is a little deceiving that we're under. But we are, prior to this last year, we were projected to have a goal of putting away $400,000 to meet that 10%. Last year was, unusual in that we were able to use the CARES funds, meet that goal right away within the year. So we're planning to go back to that goal of okay, can we start continually put away $400,000 to pick away and try to get back to that goal again. That'll go into our planning for next year. As you can see this next slide. So there could be a potential second revision. Normally you only have that if you have, major changes from this budget. If there aren't, there would not be a second revision. And then this is our starting point as we plan for 22-23. We'll start looking at those similar assumptions. What's the gen ed aid formula doing? What are we thinking for projected enrollment? Any changes in the special ed aid, federal funds, local levy, and then what are our contract costs looking like? Because that's the majority of our expenses is salary and benefits. So with that, that's all I have unless you guys have questions.
I know you had mentioned you'll unpack the CARES piece a little bit more next
Yes.
week. I did receive a question the past week about those dollars from a community member. Where would they find that information?
So most of the stuff is just in the board agenda, but if there's something that we could add to the COVID-19 tab, that I could do that as well. Maybe work with community ed or communications and see if I could put that summary out there.
I think if it wouldn't be a lot of work, that might be helpful. Because I did point them to the agenda, but that's my best guess at that point.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Marcy, I had just a couple questions. So on our first approved budget, we had forecasted a little over 12% fund balance. And now with this revision, we're down to 9.6 or 9.8, something like that.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, which is very, very concerning. So I think, as a group, we need to be mindful of that to keep inching that up, because even at the 12%, it was not where we need to be, a long ways away. The other thing is, do we have by chance a staff per student graph or ratio? Is that, did I miss that in here?
Nope.
Okay.
But I can certainly add that because that is something the state puts out actually, comparative data as well. What is the cost per student, state average and per school? So that's something I can start adding if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm thinking, maybe not even so much, how we compare to the state, but just for our own benefit, if we're a 50 to 1 or 500 to 1 or whatever that number is, to know, are we improving on our efficiencies and how we're delivering our education?
Just so the board knows, I can get data on the state's website for other schools, for us, for several years, whatever type of comparative data you guys would like,
Sure.
I'm pretty sure I can come up with something.
What made me think about, you had mentioned that I lost track if our total population is up or down in students,
Down.
and yet we have 16 more FTEs is kind of what triggered me to think about that.
Yep.
But the 16 is only from the original preliminary budget, right? Not necessarily from a prior year.
Sure.
And a lot of that happened with long-term substitutes because we just couldn't keep our people, our schools staffed with the amount of COVID that was happening in our districts. There's a couple other things I would like to add because I was shocked too when I saw the results of the first revision. But I do want to remind everyone that because of the ESSER funds and the CARES funds, our fund balance at the end of last year ended up almost $4 million above what we were anticipating. And those dollars are to help us to work through the issues, the financial issues that school districts are facing as a result of this. And although we're very concerned about that, and we're going to be very careful as we go through our budgeting, we already had our first meeting today on it. I do want the board just to be reminded that we do have some of those funds. Also, last year when we increased the fund balance policy to 10%, we were going to do that over a period of years. Can you remind me, is it 3 years?
I think it's 3 years, yeah.
Over 3 years. And so we we put in our first draft of our budget, a third of that to help get to the increase in the fund balance policy. And that was already in our budget as we went through this process and remains in there. But we ended up meeting that goal already because of those funds that came in. And so, you know, going through COVID, we certainly, that isn't the intent of those dollars, is to meet that fund balance, although I'm really happy that it did help us. But just, this has really been a very difficult year. It's been a difficult year with decreased enrollment, just with COVID in general and all the things that have occurred with it. Some of the decreased enrollment challenges that we've had, staffing challenges and so on. And so we're on top of it. But as we go into budgeting, trust us that we're going to continue to watch this, but we may have to use some of those dollars from the ESSER and CARES. And to me, that's what those dollars were entitled for. And so we will show you exactly how those dollars were used as we move forward.
So I want to thank Marcy for gritting her teeth earlier today and walking me through some of the more intricate elements of all of this stuff. Thank you. You seem to have survived it, which is pretty good. She also, yeah, well, never mind. So a couple things that maybe to kind of restate some of what you said, maybe another way. I do share Director Hagelin's concerns as it relates to the fund balance, because although it's on target, it's artificially on target.
Correct.
So, you know, even though we're on goal, we're not really on goal. And I think it kind of needs to be said, if only for the benefit of the community, that what we have is we have a date with Destiny sometime in 2024. When this money is no longer there to augment these things. And frankly, in talking to Marcy this morning, it feels like she's running out of financial gymnastics that she can do to assign these dollars to things that we can tie some sort of tie to, right? We're kind of running out of rope to have access to, you know, as much money as there. So that's good and it's bad, right? It's bad because now there's only so many things we can do to backfill for the issues that we're having. But it's good because it's gonna take us down the road during the next budgetary process of really reinstituting an actual budget that's functional for the post-COVID world. That's right. The only other thing I would say to Director Hagelin's concern is that even though that number is low, what I would say is, assuming with a little bit of hope that the pandemic recedes before the beginning of next school year, we would anticipate enrollment increasing, and as a result, those numbers will snap back the other way somewhat. So I think that's something we can hope for. I know hope isn't a business strategy, but I think that's a realistic expectation.
Well, and I think that's a really good point too, because usually at this time of year, we are seeing a decrease in our enrollment. And although it is small, every single week we're seeing an increase right now. Some of them are single digits, some of them are double digits per week, depending on what the week is. Mostly single, but we are seeing that some of our enrollment is coming back. And so we're happy about that.
But again, just to state it, the obvious, in 2024, this board will have some difficult decisions to make. Whether that's an operating referendum, whether that's substantial staffing cuts, or a reduction in services, or a combination of all of those things, it's coming. And, you know, so anything we can do in the meantime to kind of insulate against that is great, but, you know, again, she's running out of creative ways to reassign those dollars, and we're gonna have to roll up our sleeves at some point.
That's right.
I have one question, and totally off track on that, but the compensatory revenue, that's gone down because we haven't been able to identify all of the families that should be for that. One, wasn't the state gonna kind of help us with that? Because all districts are having that trouble.
So we did receive pandemic enrollment loss aid. But it's
different.
not just a makeup of the revenue, unfortunately. You have to tie it to expenses. So yes, they acknowledge that we lost money, but now we have to find expenses to match up with that revenue.
Which we didn't have to do with the original revenue.
Correct.
That's
So,
too bad.
yeah, we were
So-
hoping it would just be revenue that, hey, you had a decrease in your compensatory, here's some more revenue, and it makes up the difference. No, it has to align with certain guidelines they have of how we need to spend it.
And the other piece of that is with the free and reduced meals being free this year, all of the meals, breakfast and lunch, not nearly as many people turned in their forms so that we got those that percentage up. And that affects compensatory aid, it affects any grants and different granting opportunities that we can apply for, because you want to hit at least the 40% free and reduced. And when you don't have people turning in the forms because technically they don't need to,
That's a problem.
that affects our fund balance.
Was that deadline, when was that deadline?
October 1st.
Okay. And so
Which
what
comes
are we
around
at?
again. So that, I think, again, just to kind of restate a little bit of what Superintendent Larson said, that's not the only place that hurts us.
Correct.
There are other places where everything's formulaic, and the state in particular didn't adjust their formulas for the peaks and valleys of what COVID did, and almost all of those are negative. So what happens is you get this much money if this happened. And then they just assume that everything is exactly the same as though there was no COVID. So all these things that are depressed reduce our funding in all these different buckets. So that's another challenge that we'll have to overcome. Luckily, again, Marcy's been able to take a lot of those COVID dollars and sort of backfill for it. But the problem is when you get to the tail end of it, you're going to have that 1 year where the numbers are all still depressed, so our funding's depressed, and then it puts us behind the 8 ball a little bit more. Through no, by the way, just to be clear, through no dysfunction by Lane, Marcy, anybody, and this board. That's just the way it is.
Okay. Any other questions? We have a motion.
I'll move to approve the first revision for the 2021-2022 budget as presented.
I'll second.
The first from Director Boyles, a second from Director Spear. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you, Marcy.
And next up is our COVID-19 informational update and a revised matrix.
Good evening, members of the board, and again, I don't know what number we should start numbering these, how many presentations you've had to have. I want to say a special thanks to Director Boyles and Director Spear, who took some time last week to meet again from the initial time when we had met regarding data with Director Hagelin and Director Boyles as well. So, our overview for this evening is really to focus on one of the pressing questions that continues to happen is when can we remove face coverings? To strongly recommend. So we're going to talk about a proposed phase plan for that. What specific data to use for these recommendations? We're going to again review our mitigation strategies when we see cases increasing. Give you our overview of current data that's existing in our district, and then we've had multiple questions regarding the CDC change in quarantine guidance. So we just had some questions asking to review that as well. And then to review kind of our continued testing options and face covering options within the district. We made a point to get this information to you Friday evening, so hopefully you've all had a good chance to review the data that was in there and bring forth any questions that you might have from the data that existed in the presentation. So after meeting with Director Boyles and Director Spears, one of the recommendations when we looked at the phase back plan was to reduce it. If you remember, the first proposal had 7 phases. This proposal has 5 phases, one of which is already in place. So one of the things you'll need to come to consensus tonight as a board is if you agree that this is the proposed phase back plan we should use. This phase plan really focuses on looking at the availability of the mitigation strategies that have been in place for all students and families since the beginning of the pandemic, prioritizing our youngest students since they've had delayed access and some of those mitigation factors that families can choose. So those are the rollbacks. Any questions about those phases?
Couple things to add maybe, just for color. You know, this really is just 4 phases if you look at it, because the after school activities thing is in there. And I think, you know, what we were trying to do when we met about this was, as Director Blacklands had stated probably 3 meetings ago, what we really need is a definitive path, right? A path to how we undo and how we redo if we had to redo. Hopefully we don't get to that point. And I think the other thing is that I feel personally very good about this, not just because I was part of the discussion about it, but by itself, it's a graph. I think the devil is in the timing. which is a separate conversation, which was what I was trying to get at during the last board meeting. It didn't do a great job of, unfortunately. But I think, so I think as we deliberate and discuss this, it's important to me that we talk about the path, but we segregate that logic and that discussion from the execution of the path based on the data, if that makes sense. So I just wanted to add that color. So I apologize for taking me off track.
We actually spent a great deal of that time in the meeting discussing what data we had available to us. And the discussion of it's been based on the county data originally and focusing those cases county to school, why that shifted a little bit and really being able to then focus on our localized data that we do have. So when to move from required face coverings to strongly recommend face coverings. What we've also done is really looked at focusing on transmission rates, but having those transmission rates be specific. So we are now talking about number of positive cases of students and staff within the district. So when you look at that 0 to 19, that's minimal to low, moderate is the 20 to 49, and then high transmission is 50. That also correlates if you want to look at high transmissions within the county that goes across our entire country when you look at those numbers per 10,000. But we are relating this specifically to the number of positive cases per week in Brainerd Public Schools. The recommendation or consensus that we came to is when cases decline below 50 for 3 consecutive weeks, a decreasing trend, move to the next level of the phased plan. If we continue to see this decline, face coverings may be removed for additional levels. So our hope is everything we're hearing is this is kind of the thrust of the highest rates of the pandemic we've seen. And we're predicting, or what we're hearing is that it could significantly decrease. We're all very hopeful about that. The other question is when to look at. So if things start to increase, because we know this goes up and down and up and down and more than likely will continue to. But if we see that trend stay below 50, then we just stay right where we're at. And I'll show you some colored plans or highlights, we're gonna do that. But if we see 3 weeks of increasing trends over 50, we may look at additional mitigation measures. I can tell you we've already been doing that. So when I show you the next graph, you'll understand that. So that star again, 0 to 19, 20 to 50, 50 plus, that's actual weekly positive cases in Brainerd Public Schools. So how to make this make more sense? When we talk about trend data, so here's the overall data for students and staff that have been positive in Brainerd Public Schools since September 1st. All the way now to the end of last week, Friday. The blue bar are the positive cases and the red bar is the quarantine cases, so you really want to focus on the blue bar. Our questions that we started to discuss prior to going into Christmas break, we saw 3 weeks, that's what's highlighted in the green box, of consistent data dropping below 50. That seemed like the perfect time where we should look at a phase back plan. We also knew that coming back from the holiday break, although I don't think we thought it'd get this high, these are the number of positive cases we've had in the last 3 weeks in the blue bar. So we are seeing, I think we're at 172 positive cases combined as of just last week. So now we see 3 weeks of trend data going over 50. Additional mitigation strategies that we put in place, for example. We have closed down some programs because what we're seeing since the return is that we are now seeing student to student or within classroom transmission, where we could safely say prior to Christmas break, we weren't seeing that. It was pretty much household transmission. Now, and it's everywhere. Everybody knows that. So we're starting to see that within classroom to classrooms. We're very cognizant. So we've had some quarantines that have happened. We've had students now eating lunches within their classroom. We've actually done some resets in some early childhood and some transition programs. And those are additional mitigation strategies we can do rather than doing a whole flip to an online learning or a reset full for the district. So we've been responding specifically to what we see. But our recommendation to go back to this phase plan is when you look at when can you take them off, when you start to see that trend data go down. And the recommendation from when we sat in that meeting was when we see cases drop below 50. If you continue to see it down, do you make decisions to even go further or do multiple phases at once? Any questions about that? So that was the recommendation, because we could have stayed with the same data, look at trend data, or go with percentages, and we really thought the trend data because it's very specific week by week to positive cases within our schools.
Maybe just a couple points of clarity too. First thing is, I think many in the community, when we don't need to pull the chart back up, but there was a point where we were still featuring the county level data prominently in our dashboard. So one of the things that we did in the meeting was we basically came to the agreement that as anything other than a benchmark to look at our own district data against from a trending perspective, that data is otherwise worthless to us. It no longer has any relevance to us. because the county only gets positive cases that are reported by clinics and medical practitioners. So people who go to Walgreens and get a take-home test and go home and test positive, that's not in the county number. So we really have no idea what the actual county numbers are. Where we're super tight on our numbers within the school district because the parents are doing such a great job of reporting the positive cases, and we have a really great supply of take-home tests for parents to come in and get for their children and go home and test the kids and other family members at home. So we're getting, our numbers are better than the county's numbers is the best way to say that.
And so to that point, what we did when we looked at displaying our data back for our public, and this is all updated on our website as well, is really looking at switching to what those colors mean. So it's positive cases within our district. There's that graph right there. If you see what's highlighted in the green box, that's our current data and the prior week's data. We'll also highlight that. So as you see colors change, right now we're red, but hopefully you start to see next week and hopefully could start change colors. But we did keep the data present because we have lots of our community members who've gotten used to looking and seeking out this data. So the current cases per 10,000 to the county are down there on the left. And then we also did keep, if we would calculate that out for the school district, for the week of January 15th to the 21st, that would be our cases per 10,000.
Do you know what that is offhand?
Yep, it's right on the chart. Up there, 231.3 are the cases per 10,000, 132.2 are the county.
Well, the school is 231?
Yep, if we were doing it the old way.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, what we decided to do was stop pegging it to 10,000 since our population with staff and students is around 8,000 or whatever it is.
But it's still per 10,000, the 231?
Yeah, they're still doing the math on that particular number just to
And
put
we'll
it in county context.
Yep, we have lots of people who continue to, we have some families who are very cognizant of looking specifically at their buildings. They're also very much still comparing to the county just because of we're the microcosm of the county.
So one other point of clarity too, just from a mitigation perspective, I mean, I think maybe one of the more frustrating things for me as a school board member in this whole mess is that elements of the community are focused solely on the face covering piece and not really looking at it as a brick in a, to steal Heidi's terms, instead of looking at it as a brick in a mitigation wall, as we look at all these different ways that we battle the spread and all of these different things. And I understand why it's the focal point, but the reality is when we talk about building level and we talk about grade level, there's a lot of debate on how you can maintain that whole wall of mitigation strategies if you go to those different ways of looking at it, which is kind of why we're presently sort of focused back on grade level, because we believe it presents the best chance to logically keep the wall in place. Did I say that right?
Correct. It's just one of the many layers and factors. We have lots of mitigation strategies in place. Face coverings are just one. But what's changed since the beginning of this and when we originally put this in place since the beginning of the year is, like we talked about, there are more mitigation strategies and options available to families than there were in August. We have rapid tests available to our students and families. They can pick them up from our school nurse. There's also free rapid testing happening within the community. Vaccinations are now available for students ages 5+ for families who choose to have their child vaccinated. But on top of that, we do things like if we start to see what we've had to do more since Christmas break, which we hadn't really had to do before because we weren't seeing that class-to-class transmission. We're notifying families. Some families are opting to keep their child home because they've had a positive exposure within that classroom. So we have notifications going out with that classroom transmission. And when we're starting to see it populate, we're having kids eat within their classrooms rather than being able to go out and about. We might have them isolating from a gym class compared to running around with the other gym classes, because our ultimate goal is to stay in-person learning the entire year as much as possible. This has been difficult. I have to give a tremendous kudos out to our staff. So when you look at those positive numbers of staff going out and students, the number of vacancies we have, so we have lots of our teachers pulling double duty with having to give up their prep to go cover a class, to do things. So everybody's kind of pitching in. The last 3 weeks have been taxing. And so, but so far we've been able to hold on with the staffing that we need to at this point. So.
But it's important to note that in the states of New Mexico and Oklahoma, they're calling up National Guard to come in and be substitute teachers because this thing's punching through the vaccines for people that have 2 doses especially. And so, that's a problem. But on the other side, what I would say, is the last thing I'll say, by the way, is the encouraging data out of South Africa, Israel, a couple of European countries, and then even New York and New Jersey, where they were the first to see the Omicron wave, is it appears to be subsiding as rapidly as it's hitting.
And that's what we're very hopeful for.
Everybody in the room just knock on something wood, and I think,
You know, the other thing too that's been getting is we've had a lot of substitutes who've stepped up too. So originally last year when we were struggling with staffing, there was a lot of fear, just not knowing what was gonna happen and what would exist. And we've seen our substitutes step back up and some of our retired staff who avoided coming into sub last year for just not knowing where things were going. So it really has taken a whole community. And the good news is we're just down 2 buses tomorrow. So we're slowly getting that population back up and running as well. I'm very hopeful. My goal is week 4, we start to see a different color. The quarantine update, just for review, we did go down to that 5-day quarantine. So we've been talking to our families and staff as that happens. Basically, after a positive case, they quarantine for 5 days. On day 6, as long as their symptoms are pretty mild, they continue to wear a face covering. For our staff, we've recommended that they not eat with their colleagues, just continue to keep themselves a little bit more isolated after that case, but we have adopted the full day, or the 5-day shortened quarantine. One of the confusion pieces is, however, though, the Minnesota State High School League still has in place 10-day. So a lot of our young athletes have been frustrated. They've been able to come back to class, however, they haven't been able to actively participate or compete for that 10-day, and that's underneath the guidance. And actually, they had an extended graduated return to practice, but they've gone back now to that 10-day. Questions about that? I feel like after these last couple weeks, people have that more. This has been a graphic that's caused confusion. This has really been a graphic we've used since March of 2020. This is how we make decisions about when to isolate a classroom or potentially quarantine a classroom and to add additional mitigation strategies. I think the hope was somehow that this would be able to apply to everything, but it really can't because it's so specific to what's happening within a classroom or within a certain site. But that's the same guidance, and it's the influenza matrix that's existed with public health. So we just want to say this is really a graphic of, for those of us, the nurses in the buildings. I'm working directly with our nursing staff, our district nurse. When we start to think, is there something we need to do specific within a classroom or program? This is where we look to reference. It really doesn't tie back to the other data.
This was in place even before COVID for like influenza.
Correct. It's really
and
like,
other
so when we've
things.
had, really where I've seen it in my tenure of being in the schools for 26 years is whooping cough.
Okay.
Or a potential flu outbreak. We really started to look at how many kids have had it within that classroom, how many kids are showing symptoms, do we need to respond differently? So when COVID came around, this was really one of the things they could do, especially when it was starting to happen so fast in March and we started the school year. Boy, this is data you can track and respond. And so that's what we've been using since this all has started. So it's not tied to our face covering, it's not tied to protocols or phase plans, it's, you know, Mrs. Spears' classroom now has 3 kids positive with COVID and 7 kids are absent. What should we be doing? This is where we go and we look and maybe make some of those decisions. And like I said, that's where we start to look at additional mitigation factors. Could it be isolating them? Could it be, we do a lot more in-depth interviews and calling families to say, do you have a positive in the household? What's going on? Because the other thing is strep is running rampant, influenza is running rampant, the stomach flu is going around, kids have been locked inside because it's really cold. That's when we start to see lots of illnesses, just not COVID. So, and then a reminder to our face covering on buses, that mandate is still in place till March 18th of 2022. They should be providing more guidance on that date, probably the 1st of February, if it'll get extended. This continues all this information we have on our district website, so people can watch all of that. And like I said, I have lots of families that call specific to their building. And then we'll still put in this presentation, this is the Crow Wing County data that they provide to us weekly. So that is also attached to this presentation. And then just some reminders. So the rapid tests we've been using have been the Buy Next Now test. We pretty much have distributed just over 6,000 of those tests. So our next test that we've gotten in, that's called the BD Veritor test. And so those are now going out to families. We did send a letter out on January 14th kind of explaining that. The difference with the BD Veritor test is it's read by a smart device. So we've been trying to inform our families too that if you go to take a test and if you don't have access to a smart device, we really want to make sure you get the Buy Next Now test from us. However, those are getting to be in shorter and shorter supply because that was our first batch. We do have KN95 masks. This is what they look like. Those have been available to our staff and students, and we continue to have more of the surgical mask available too. So we always have those on site for visitors and for all of our students and staff coming in. So our nurses have been very, very, very busy.
And so has Heidi.
But again, that's my recollection, at least being involved in this. This is maybe the 4th or 5th time we've asked you, Angie, and others to change the tires on the bus while you're driving it.
Yep, and that's,
Can't state our appreciation enough for the flexibility and the compassion that you show every time you go back to the drawing board.
well, it takes a village, so I'm looking at Sarah. So Sarah's been one of our data meisters too, so we have figured out how things can be calculated, and then Anne Marie in communications. So there's a lot of us that sit down to meet. And again, our goal is to try to communicate as clearly as we can to our families and make sure that they have access to the information that they're looking for, so.
And once again, I want to say thank you to those community members that have stepped up to be bus drivers, substitute teachers. I mean.
It's taking a village, and I'm very, very hopeful that everything we're hearing becomes a reality.
No, it's nice to see so many people wanting to be part of the solution.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So that's why I love being in schools.
Heidi, I've got as you might expect, a couple of questions.
Absolutely.
First of all, though, thank you to Sarah and Kevin to take time and work with Heidi and Angie and whoever else. I really appreciate that. I think the third to the last slide or someplace in there, when it had your, keep going, that one?
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying, because that's been confusing to me. I would recommend removing that from your future presentations, because it has nothing to do with our mask mandates, right?
Correct. It has our response.
Okay.
I think the hope
Yep.
was somehow,
Got it.
like your question was, to make them link, and there's just really not a way to
Got
do
it.
that.
Okay. And then I just wanted to get some clarity on, and again, I appreciate this, if I'm understanding correctly, if the transmission if the positives are 50 or below for 3 consecutive weeks, that's when we would go from phase 1 to phase 2.
That's what we want you to give us that direction. That's
Sure,
our
yep.
recommendation,
Yeah.
is that when you can see that, it's very clear, like, wow, look at that. That's,
Yep. That's all.
so then we say, and then I think the discussion that has to happen is, do you go to the next phase, or is it a point where you go phase 2, phase 3? I mean, that's the decisions that need to be made.
Okay, so I think what I'm seeing in the presentation is that 3 consecutive months would go to the next phase.
3 weeks, you said months.
Or weeks, excuse me, thank you. If that trend continues another 3 weeks, we'd go.
No,
to the
it
next-
doesn't have to be that long. If the trend continues to go down, that's where the administration is sort of empowered to sort of accelerate that to the extent that the trend data at the building level or the grade level could support it, or district-wide could support it. So if you look at the green box up here on the chart, and I'll let Heidi do a smarter job of this, if that trend were to continue for a 4th week, then we'd probably accelerate the phases and go week to week, or maybe even do 2 phases at the same time, because we feel confident in the data.
And then I think
Because otherwise, if you do 3 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks, we're at the end of the school
3
year.
months out. So that's, the goal is, once we start
So
to
we
see
could
that.
do 2 phases. If we
Yeah,
saw
in theory, you
really
could end up
strong
combining
trend.
all of those into 1
Yeah.
or 2 phases, and if the data continues to recede to the point where the administration feels comfortable with that.
And the other thing we talked about is if, let's say it popcorns up and down, which we know it will, as long as it's staying underneath that 50 mark, not then implementing. Because then really we can respond, and we have been responding to what we see happening specific in a classroom, a program, a grade level, or a building level. We've been doing that since this started in March of 2020.
Which is back to one of your original points about the toggle switch at, if you take them off at what point, what is the metric for putting them back on? And it's a sustained trend above 50 that shows no sign of going back down, because the popcorn doesn't popcorn anymore. It climbs for 3 weeks in a row, then we're back to the drawing board again.
Yeah. So I guess I'm trying to understand, though, does it require 3 consecutive weeks of decline trend, or is it 3 consecutive weeks that are below 50?
Below 50 is recommendation, because over 50 is considered high transmission, and that's coming from the Department of Health as well. And if you
That's
look
where
at,
I would say it's kind of in our, we'll look at it and discuss, and if it's declining quickly, we might be more aggressive in our, whereas if it's more popcorning, we might take it slower.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
and again, from what we've been told and sitting through meetings, when we're seeing this extreme spike, they said this rapid uptick that we've seen, they're expecting a rapid downtick. Now, again, that's predicting data, so we're just gonna watch what happens, but that's what we're hearing will happen.
And it does really just depend, like you said, Heidi, where the cases are. If there's 25 cases in one school and we're looking at, this trend, it looks a little bit different than there's 3 cases in each school.
Correct.
And how you mitigate against that. And I think to your point and Kevin's point, when you say we put up this wall, there's a lot of other layering that happens besides masking.
Correct.
Okay, so, but this recommendation is based on district-wide, not by classroom, not by building, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
It gets very difficult, like we've talked about, when we have over 100 buses running and 4,700 plus kids on buses. We have kids crisscrossing every building, every grade level based just on transportation. So the thought was start with district-wide data, then once you do roll that back, then there are some very specific decisions you can make based on building, grade level things that are happening.
okay. So this is more of a curiosity question, but looking at the graph, if what we're talking about tonight is what we implemented back at the beginning of the school year, it appears to me that, other than maybe 2 bumps in there above 50, it would be below 50 across the whole entire school year.
And that goes, it goes back to the discussion of what's changed since the beginning of the school year till now. Mitigation factors or mitigation options like rapid testing availability. We just started getting that rapid testing availability to all of our students and families in November. When you look at vaccinations for children ages 5 and plus, are all school-age children technically outside of early childhood, that happened in middle of November. So some of those decisions we've talked about, why could we change things? There's additional mitigation options that existed for our families, or that exist for our families now than they did the 1st of September. So looking at why decisions were made in August and September and how those could change now.
I don't know that I followed your comment on that. I guess I was looking at the. So are you saying that the reason why we've got such a high uptick is because we have more rapid testing now?
No, well, I mean, the availability of testing is much more readily available. Like we have families who aren't going to clinics. They go to clinic and waiting 5 days, so I think we're hearing more. I think we have a rapid uptick because COVID's everywhere right now.
Yeah.
Like the outbreaks we're having now did not exist in the beginning of September.
Well, and it's probably exacerbated by, if you look at the rapid downtick, right, that was winter break, and then kids are home and confined to home, right?
Yeah, the last 6 weeks or whatever, I get that and understand that.
Yeah, but you're looking at like
But I'm looking
September
across the
to
board
November.
Yeah, that it seems like if what we're suggesting now was in place, that we wouldn't have had the mask, and I'm just wondering, is that kind of what you're?
So I can, again, to answer that, so if you want to look all the way back, yes, that I would say if parents, if you remember, one of the strongest voices that came to many of you at the beginning of the school year is not all children have the same option for vaccination, right? So that didn't exist. Now 5 to 11-year-olds, that was about mid-November when that availability came. So one of the questions of why should it become more optional? Because families have more options and more choices for mitigation strategies now than they did at the beginning of September. So that was the discussion we were having at the board table prior to going into Christmas break. Like what changed from decisions that were made in August to what would change our decisions now as we entered into Christmas break? And that was one of the things we looked at, is looking at our overall data trend.
And I'm not being critical of the decision back then, I'm just, I guess bringing caution if that's what's being recommended, because it appears that we wouldn't have had masks then, and really the only thing, I don't remember when the under 18 vaccination was available.
Right around the beginning of the, even before the beginning of the
In
year.
August,
Because it
or-
started 16 to 18 and then it went 12 to,
In the fall.
yeah.
That would be first doses though, then you've got, you get your lag between your first dose, your second dose, and your booster. I mean, they're 3 to 4 weeks apart on the first 2 shots, and then, I don't know what they're recommending for kids, 6 months for the third, or is it a shorter time frame?
I think it's 6 months at this point.
The people that email me or reach out to me or confront me in a grocery store and that type of thing today are bringing concerns about COVID masks, not all, but most, based on information that we had back or resources that we had back when we put the mask mandate in place. Today, the opportunities that we have, like Heidi is saying, to provide basically an equal playing field for a lot of families to get vaccinated if they like, it provides such a different playing field now that those same frustrations and concerns aren't necessarily lining up with the realities that we have for us today. And so basically, a lot of those concerns are really out of date. And I think that comes down to just everybody trying to catch up to the realities that we have in terms of those options right now and how that applies to us as individuals. So basically, from where I sit, everybody's trying to catch up with the information, but the same general concern persists, but the playing field that we're on has changed so much more differently. And it's a tricky situation to handle from where I sit, trying to have those conversations with individuals, but also hear their concern. But I think what we have to do is we need to be looking at the data that we have right now. We have to look at the mitigation opportunities that we have right now and go from there. It doesn't really do us any good from where I sit to rehash about the decisions that we made then and try to apply those decisions to the world we live in today, because it's evolved so quickly.
I think it harkens back to something that Director Sjogren said back in the beginning of all this, which is you're never going to be able to measure the prevention. So I'd argue that if you go back to the graph that Heidi had up, maybe those numbers were there because of masks, not that we shouldn't have had masks because of them, and we'll never know the answer to that. Right. There's no way to prove it or disprove it. So anybody can claim they know the answer to that, and every single person that makes that claim is either lucky and right and we'll never know it, or completely wrong, period.
And the other thing that I think we've quickly forgotten because we haven't had to do it this year is the amount of classrooms we quarantined last year because one positive case existed there. MDH and MDA came out with very clear guidance. If you have face coverings and a positive exists within a classroom, you do not have to quarantine out that entire classroom. So that was also a very strong piece when we were putting those decisions together, is when you look at contact tracing and putting out, because I mean, those of you who have high school students, the joke is it wasn't hard to figure out who the positive was because you come back to class the next day and it was like a bullseye around the class, and we'd have a positive on the bus and we'd remove a third of the kids off the bus because you had to do 2 seats in front, 2 seats behind, 2 diagonal, 2 to the side. Their guidance was with face coverings, you did not have to quarantine students like that. So that was also a big factor into that decision-making back then.
And I think even when I look at this, I don't see a 3-week trend of declining numbers anytime before that December timeframe. So I mean, I wasn't here at that point, but I don't know that I would have felt really confident if we would have been using this matrix at that time.
But I think the questions that came, those 3 weeks coming in leading up to the board meeting before break was, boy, it's really looking like things are good, we're stabilized. We were feeling very good because like we said, options are available, testing's available to families. There's lots of options and choices. That was the recommendation as we sat, declining trend below 50. That would be the recommendation then to look at a phase back. And then how quickly you roll those phases really is going to be dependent on what we're seeing and you're comfortable with.
Thank you, that was a good final description. Any other discussion? Is there a motion to approve this new information update in the new matrix?
I'll make a motion to approve the new matrix.
Thank you, Director Spiegel.
So what is this for? Sorry, we'll wait for a
The
second.
information update in the new revised matrix.
And how we're gonna take the face coverings off and how we're going to increase opportunities throughout the school. So that 5-phase process.
So when do you like the phase plan and agree with it? And then
So everybody understands how we're gonna go about doing that. That's what we're asking tonight for approval of.
So first from Director Spear,
I'll second it.
second from Director Blacklands. Further discussion?
Just again, for clarity, I just want to make sure that it's 3 consecutive weeks below 50. It's not 3 consecutive declines.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yep.
That's not what's stated in here. I just want to make sure. And that we can go more than just one phase if we want to.
Right.
So we could accelerate and do, like I say, you could do it all at once if the numbers drop precipitously.
And
Oh, you're talking about the decreasing trend there.
right. And then what was the what was the rationale on the 50? How did you come up with what?
So if you go, we determine and defined. I don't know if you can share the screen again, Sarah.
That's all right.
So high transmission is how it was defined. So this is considered low minimal, moderate, high.
Based from
MD and MDH guidance when we originally looked at what defined high transmission within a school.
And still different.
And they still define that as high transmission.
50 of based on.
Well, 50 is our number based on the percentages, right?
So it was 50 per 10,000, and then we were jumping back and forth between the data, and we thought this would simplify it to be able to just have one view of that data.
Okay, so it's based on a 50 per 10,000.
Yeah, but it's actually 50
But it's
per
50 per
8,000 and change.
8,000.
So it actually gives us a little bit
But
extra.
it was based on that 10,000.
Originally, yeah, but then we said for simplification, why do we keep going back to a fictional number instead of our own district number?
And Director Hagelin, there was 5 phases to this. If there was like 5 different colors, we just said we're going with 3. So, to really track that.
The only piece that I'd add to the discussion, I guess, to just add some clarity is, I guess, I feel like phase 2 and phase 3 could go together when we do it.
Say that again,
I feel
please.
like phase 2 and phase 3 could go together when we do it.
Yeah, I agree.
I would guess we might do that very well. We'll look at the numbers.
Well, then,
That's kind of why I
since that's
asked
a
the
discussion item, I mean, that's an action item we could take is to direct the team to go back and combine those into a phase. You say 2 and 3?
But we certainly can look at it carefully and just do both of them. If, and should there be some reason not to do the high school, we have that too. So, either way.
Thank you, Director Hagelin.
Yeah, I think the only logical dividing line that was in there was specifically segregating after-school activities from in-school.
Yeah, that's really the dividing line.
That's really the only reason that that's there. But I would
I guess
agree
the
that if we
reason
empower,
And the reason I put it out there is because if we're really taking a next step, 9 to 12 after-school activities are already done. So really for that population, a next step, yeah, I don't know.
This is,
right, but again, it's all against the backdrop of vaccination eligibility or
That's kind of how it's
availability.
rolled
First
back.
group eligible for vaccination.
And I think for that group, there's not as many mitigation efforts we can do, just because that population is so intermixed. And they're, I think, more active out in the community, and so it's
These are kids-
harder when we do see some outbreaks there.
Yeah, these are the kids that, they drive and they go out and about and they intermingle. And the minute, our 9th through 12th graders, the minute a bell rings, they all crisscross. So it's very difficult to isolate by separate. But that can be, if you give us that directive.
So do we need to add that to, do we have to make a
I mean,
friendly
I still,
amendment?
my own
or-
take is that I like it the way it's presented with the idea that if the data supports it, you just lump them in there and go, to your point.
Yeah.
But that the item of separation there at least allows us the opportunity if there's something in the, because remember, we don't have to just look at it at the one graph. We can go by grade level and look at the trending.
Yeah, that's not what we're saying we're gonna do in the plan, is all I'm saying. If I were an administrator right now, I still would feel like it's muddy for me to make that decision. But if
So-
you guys feel good about it, I can feel good about it, but I don't feel like that gives you a lot of direction to
Well, I think-
delineate between the phases.
I think when you get here, when it comes back to, you're gonna have decisions to say, are we comfortable with just anything that's not associated with school, potentially like community and facility usage, or are we comfortable where we're ready, like, nope, we're going 2 and 3 together, or we're
Right.
going 2, 3, and 4 together. Or
Right,
we're-
but what I heard is it's not coming back to us each time. We're not meeting
No.
often enough to.
You're gonna just trust that we can make
Yeah.
that decision, but I have it in our notes based on what you said. But, and I have that it could be likely that those would go together if the data supports it. Does that work? Okay,
I mean, to me, if you combine them, you can't uncombine them. By not combining them, they still have the ability to combine them, I guess is kind of where I'm at.
That's true.
One of them's engaged, the other one's married, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I like them separate because they're so very different. So we have a first from Director Spear, a second from Director Blacklands. Any further discussion?
I appreciate the efforts from you all on this, working towards a path. I think we're definitely a step further.
Has not been an easy year.
It's getting really old.
Well, listen, I mean, I said this during the election before I even sat with you guys. The Monday morning quarterbacking that can take place on all of this stuff is insane, right? We're all gonna know in 2 years, all these different things that everybody from the last two presidents of the United States all the way down could have done better, could have done differently, but everybody's doing the best they can do.
Right.
That's the bottom line. Best thing we can do is to keep evaluating the data, listening to people, hearing their concerns, and acting. That's all you can do.
Okay, I'm gonna call the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We're on to informational. We have an Equity Advisory Task Force update from Director Blacklands.
All right. I have the opportunity here to share a little bit about what the Equity Task Force has been up to during the last meeting. And we were able to get some good traction, I felt, as a committee. And the first big step is that we got the green light to carry out the February 10th Community Dialogue, which will be in room 200 of Wesby from 6 to 7 p.m. So I'm excited about that. And then also the other item as it relates to the Equity Task Force is, as a group, we were able to come to an agreement and a landing place, if you will, on what our first bucket for our framework will be in terms of moving forward as a task force. And that first bucket will be to focus on student safety and engagement. And that's one of the items, or the item that'll be covered on the February 10th Community Dialogue. It will give the community the opportunity to be able to ask some questions and essentially have that dialogue, which is really important, I feel. Again, that'll be on February 10th at room 200 for Wesby. And then also, there was a discussion after we decided on that bucket, that to begin educating the employees, staff, on what we're doing and essentially why we're doing it and that sort of thing. Make sure that we get them on the same page as well, or at least understanding our goals.
Okay, so that February 10th meeting will be put prominently on our website, and how else are we getting the word out for that?
I would assume so, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're pretty excited.
Okay. Okay, good.
Again, I was able to attend that meeting now that we have 6 board members. Again, I was able to attend that meeting last week along with Director Blacklands, and I would say it went a long way towards assuaging some of the issues that I perhaps had with the body before I joined it, which were a certain level of opacity as it relates to, how we were communicating what was happening in that room to the community, providing for community opportunities for feedback. And I really feel like the last couple of meetings, one where I wasn't there and this last one where I was there, the group took huge strides to move us more into a transparent, the group is challenged a little more than some other groups because, of some of the topics that are in there, it can't necessarily follow the same logic and rules that like a project oversight would. Otherwise, the dialogue you need to happen doesn't happen, but we need to go to great lengths to make sure that we're highly transparent and communicative about what's going on in there. And this community session is a really, really big step in that direction. I'm super excited for it.
I agree.
Great. Business services report. You're not quite as quick as you sometimes are.
Caught me off guard. I was like, oh, that's me.
It's not because I went shorter than planned.
No, not at all. So in your packet is the financial report. The only thing I was going to note, same as previous, that food service and community ed are tracking similar to 2 years ago. And that the next financial report, January's, will be in March. We'll have the revised budget that I presented tonight. Any questions?
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you. And Superintendent's report.
Yeah, I would like to add just a little bit to what Marcy had talked about earlier and just review again. As Director Boyle said a little while ago, when we look at the budget, we know that these dollars that we have been getting from the state and federal government are one-time dollars, and that in 2024, there's going to be a big, big change that the district is going to be facing with. And so I do want the board to know that during our budgeting this spring, and I know again next spring too with the business manager and the superintendent, that we will take this very seriously to make sure that we're looking at our enrollment, looking at our needs, and making the reductions that we need along the way in hopes to not make that adjustment in 2024 as painful as it could be if we weren't diligent at looking at our budget. And so I just want to reaffirm our commitment to making sure that we're making the right decisions, as we always do. But we know that anytime you do budget reductions, it's very hard. And people don't like sometimes the numbers that you have for class sizes and stuff. One of the things that we've always done in our budgeting is identify the assumptions. But we're also going to determine like a matrix of parameters that we're looking at going into the budgeting so that we're consistent through every building as we meet with the principals and we meet the directors in each of the departments. So I just wanted to reaffirm that because I didn't feel that I had addressed that carefully. But we will be looking at making the reductions that we have to make this year and again next year to try to prevent anything really serious in 2024, knowing that that could be there if we don't. A couple other things just a couple of date changes, and I guess one of them's already changed, so I don't need to talk about that. But on February 8th, we have the Equity Task Force, but we are also going to have, with our project oversight team meeting, we're going to have a budget analysis. Dave Bergeron's going to come and talk to the board regarding some budget issues. And so I just wanted the board to know that we will be looking at our building project budget again, which we do on a regular basis. And finally, two things that I really want to talk about. January 31st. As everyone knows, in our goals for the Blueprint 181, we had 8 goals that we drove every decision against as we were moving forward to pass the referendum. And one of the goals was to increase career and technical education in our schools and to also enhance our workforce development. And we promised our Chamber of Commerce at that time that we were going to do the work that we needed to do, not only in CTE, but in all of the areas of our school to enhance the workforce of the future in hopes that our kids find possibilities right here where they can stay here at home and build a wonderful career here, or they can go to college and come back and develop that workforce skill and at our local college or wherever, and that they can develop that workforce for our future. So one of the things that I've been talking about with Andrea an awful lot is we made that promise, and now we have this phenomenal CTE wing. So I think it's time that we work to really show it off and to show how we are living up to that commitment. And our BHS staff, along with BLADEC and the Chamber of Commerce here in Brainerd, are having this wonderful open house on Monday, January 31st. That's next Monday at 4 o'clock. It'll be there from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. People are going to be able to tour those departments to see what's going on, to be able to have some of those conversations about how can we engage as the businesses in our community and the programming that we're doing in our high school. How do we also communicate with CLC? I know I met with Dr. Charlier on Friday, to talk about that collaboration again and how we can continue to build that workforce development. We are super excited about this. And so I hope that everybody can make it at 4 o'clock on the 31st and come and hear the presentations, walk around the department, and really learn a lot about what they're doing and what the hopes and dreams are for that department as we move forward. And finally, on February 10th, Director Blacklands talked about a community equity dialogue in room 200 at 6 o'clock. I do want to tell the board that we are really excited because Erin Karlgaard, who is kind of leading us through this right now, has already been going out to community organizations and sharing some of this work that she's going to talk about that on the 10th. And it's, she's really showing like the different aspects of our continuum and how it works, and just really doing a beautiful, beautiful job. So I really encourage people to come that day too, because there's so much, like you said, we're going to talk about safety in our school and how, what we're doing to enhance that and to provide equitable safety throughout our district. So some really great things happening. It is super fun to be talking about things besides COVID, and to be talking about the wonderful education that we provide at Brainerd Public Schools and how we're going to continue to move this forward. And it's really fun to start having this conversation again. So that's my report.
Thanks. Just one thing on the CTE open house. I'm out of town that night, so I won't be able to be there, but I'm going to plan to go see it another time. But I hope we're also highlighting our aviation program. I don't know if that's part of it, but I know several students that are in college now because of what we do with aviation, and so
That's true.
That should really be part of that program too. So just a comment on that.
Awesome.
And I'm not 100% sure this is in order, but I don't know how anybody else has heard this, but I've heard from multitudes of staff members throughout the district expressing their gratitude to Superintendent Larson and this body for the restructuring and adding those in-service days for the staff. It's already had a demonstrable morale impact, at least to the people that I've talked to. So
I would agree. I've heard more about that than anything, and yeah, it was
People have been really appreciative.
yeah, people have gone out of their way to reach out to me on that.
Yeah.
I do have one more thing that I forgot to mention, and that is that the staff at Brainerd High School has been talking a lot about what they've learned through the first semester, and knowing that on May 2nd, we have to have all of the academic wing out of its space so we can be doing the construction from May 2nd until school starts in September. And so I did want the board to know, I know I sent some information to you from Andrea and her team, that they are going to, right now we have 3 days per week that is a 7-period day, and 2 days that are on the block schedule with the WIN program on those 2 days of the block. To make the transition smoother throughout this second semester, we are going to have a 7-period day, all 5 days of the week, beginning, and I forgot the date, I think it's February 7th. So we're going to get into it a couple of weeks and help kids transition what that'll look like differently. And then they're going to have the 7-period day. We will have the WIN time on Wednesdays. And, but I wanted the board and the community to know that we will be making that change right away so that we don't have to make some changes now and then on May 2nd just have everything in total upheaval. We want to keep education going all the way through June 3rd on graduation day. So I'm really proud of the team for taking a look at that, and wanted to make sure that the board knew that. So.
I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I know there are some staff concerns about that May timetable as it relates to capacity.
Yep.
Right? And I know that plan's still probably a little bit in development.
It is still in development, but I do want you to know that we made that decision way back like in August or September, so there was plenty of time to make that transition on May 2nd. And so what's going to happen is, we keep telling everyone, your room, if you have a prep time, let's say it's third hour, just for instance, there might be another class coming in and using that room during third hour. We're going to really use all of the spaces for that 3 weeks that we have left during the year. And high school will figure it out. They're good at that. So. But it'll be a shuffle. That's just part of it. But we planned for a long time for it, and so we should have as smooth of a transition as we possibly can at that time. So we're just about done, guys.
Yeah.
Just
it'll be lovely.
Yeah, it will. It'll be awesome. Much
better space.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent Larson. So we've kind of already gone over the next future meetings, and there's been a bunch more meetings to put on your schedule from the previous meeting we had tonight. And so everyone get their calendar up to date tonight when they get home. And if there's nothing else to come before the board?
Maybe the big event, do you want to say that?
Oh, okay, yeah, the big event is coming up on February 5th, and I don't know if there's any tickets available still for in-person?
Sold out.
It
Might
is
be
sold
in
out?
person, but you can still get virtual tickets.
But still get virtual, okay. Okay. So, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I'll second.
First from Director Schokeren, a second from Director Blackglance. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign, motion carries.
7:29?
Thank you, everyone.